Before we jump in, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. It seriously helps the channel grow. All right, let's get started. Monkey D. Luffy never looked back on the past. Regret wasn't part of who he was until time itself betrayed him. Without warning, Luffy becomes trapped inside a relentless time loop. No matter what he does, the world resets, erasing victories, undoing losses, and forcing him to relive the same days again and again. At first, he laughs it off, treating it like another strange adventure. But the joke doesn't last. Luffy remembers everything, every failure, every death, every moment that no one else can recall. While the world stays frozen, Luffy changes, growing more aware, more serious, and slowly worn down by the weight of endless repetition. Each attempt to break free only uncovers a deeper mystery behind the loop, revealing a cruel truth. Some events refuse to change, no matter how hard Luffy fights. Hope begins to fade, replaced by exhaustion and doubt. Now trapped in an eternal present, Luffy must face a nightmare worse than any enemy, a world where freedom no longer exists and escape may be impossible. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Rebound by Noodlehammer.
Chapter 13. Wunan's island is said to be somewhere around these parts. The Great Gold Pirate. Luffy's ears perked up at the unfamiliar words Nami was muttering to herself. Not because he cared about the gold, but because it was something new. Also because he was hungry. He had been trying to not eat all the food right away, but these time loops were making sailing from island to island even more boring than normal, and boredom made him hungry. Wunan. Who's Wunan? He asked. Zoro, Nami, and Usopp all looked at him incredulously. You've never heard of Wunan? The famous East Blue pirate said to have collected a third of the world's gold. Nami asked. Never. Luffy confirmed. But everyone in the East Blue knows the story. Usopp protested. If anyone in the East Blue would be ignorant of it, it would be Luffy. Zoro reasoned. That's true. Nami and Usopp nodded sagely. I would have heard about it in the time loops if it was true. Luffy yelled back, outraged by their lack of faith in his intelligence. Oh, right, the time loops. This was still very early in their adventure, and their faith in the time loops was not very strong. This is probably just like that mushroom idiot. Luffy decided. It was the only thing that really made sense to him, and he just hoped it would be less annoying. On the bright side, anything that broke up the monotony of having to keep repeating the same thing over and over was good. Which was why he was actually glad to see three unknown guys sneaking aboard their ship. Hey, who are you guys? He asked, making them freeze in place. They're after my treasure. Nami instantly roared, preparing to commit murder most heinous to defend her precious money. Ah, take this. The thieves yelled in panic, throwing about a dozen onigiri their way. Food. The three men of the straw hats yelled, diving for the treats. What about the thieves? Nami roared at them. They might have more treasure. Get them. Okay. Luffy shrugged, having already devoured more than half of the onigiri. He'd have eaten more, but Zoro and Usopp had been hungry too and therefore on the ball enough to snatch as much as they could. The thieves had only just managed to get back on their small boat when the rubber man caught up to them. The resulting fight took no time at all. Man, so weak. Luffy sighed in disappointment. He supposed he should have expected it since this was still the East Blue, but he forgot about that in the excitement of seeing something new for a change. Don't call us weak when you ate a devil fruit like El Drago. The three thieves protested, cowering at the end of their small boat. El Drago. The rubber man tilted his head at the unfamiliar name. Who's El Drago? He's scum. A beaten-up kid suddenly shouted, jumping out of nowhere. He beat me up and made me work for him. Wait, that's not right. The great pirate Tobio, infiltrated his crew so that I could find Wunan and join his crew. Luffy thoughtfully stuck a pinky in his ear, considering the situation. This kid sounded a lot like Usopp, and everyone was talking about Wunan all of a sudden. This had the feel of an adventure, but was it even worth it when everyone was so weak? I'm hungry. He finally sighed. Oh no, it's El Drago. The three beaten-up thieves shouted. And he's going to use his devil's power. Luffy turned around to look. There was a big lion-looking guy wearing a lot of gold on a ship some distance away. Wait, he was more like a cat. And he was yelling. Luffy was way too experienced by this point to be surprised by the beam of force that blasted out of the cat guy's mouth, so he just grabbed Tobio and jumped back to the Going Merry. The beam wasn't going to hit the ship dead on, so he just watched it curiously. It was kinda cool and the wave it created was kinda fun. Oi, Tobio, do you know where we could get food? He asked while everyone else was busy panicking for no reason. My grandpa has an Odin sea stall nearby. Tobio said numbly. XXXXX. Well, you've gone and cleaned out my stock. Gonzo, Tobio's grandpa, said while scratching his chin. I guess that means you liked it. I can't even complain about how much he ate. Nami commented mostly to herself, still baffled by Gonzo's prices. Seriously, who charged only 11 belly for over 100 servings? How was he even still in business? It was great, Luffy enthused. Almost as good as Sanji's. You're saying that someone else can make better oden than me? Gonzo yelled, mustache bristling. Sanji is the personal chef of the future pirate king, me. Obviously he's the best, Luffy informed him. You're not as great as Woonen. Tobio interjected passionately. If he's so great then I want to meet him. Luffy decided. If nothing else, it would make for a nice change from the usual boredom of repeating events. Pa, why would Woonen bother with you? The kid yelled. Because I'm going to be the pirate king. Luffy replied blandly. Hadn't they been over this already? Stop it with the stupid jokes. Tobio yelled again. Why don't you just say that I don't have what it takes to join Woonen's crew? That's up to you. He's dead serious. Zoro told the baffled boy. Woonen's gold, Nami was daydreaming. Then she suddenly stood up, slamming her hands on the counter. I've decided. We're going to find Woonen's gold and take it for ourselves. Oi, that means we'd have to beat his crew, the crew of the Great Gold Pirate. Usopp fretted. I think my gold allergy is acting up. Don't worry, Usopp. Luffy assured him. Even if he really is a big deal in the East Blue, this is still the weakest sea. Woonen is nothing compared to the dangers of the Grand Line. Shockingly, this did nothing to calm Usopp down, and it had the side benefit of enraging the Woonen fanboy Tobio. XXXXX. After the excitement calmed down, Gonzo decided that he had to wash all the dirty dishes that the Straw Hat Gluttony had generated. In order to do this, they sailed a short distance to a nearby island. Nami, having sailed the East Blue in search of treasure to buy out her village, didn't recognize it. Tobio was quick to tell her that it was Woonen's island. Luffy knew he was an idiot, but this all seemed awfully convenient even to him. Still, they were not really in a rush to get to the Baratie, so he just shrugged and went along with it. It didn't take long before they ran into El Drago, who was also searching for Woonen's treasure. Luffy was disappointed by the gold-obsessed pirate. He had been so incredibly weak. Not particularly strong or fast, and he only knew how to do a single thing with his devil fruit. Zoro had had a little more trouble with the man's hired swordsman, but not much. After that, looking for the treasure was more of a leisurely stroll across the island. The weird castle had been empty, the mountain that the whale's tail pointed at had been a diversion. In the end, they found Woonen's skeleton and final words in the hidden basement of an empty house. So, the real treasure was the adventure he had along the way. Luffy concluded. A wise man. Wise. Nami roared in outrage. He gave all the gold back. Why would anyone do that? Yeah, didn't the legend say that he only stole from bad people? Usopp chimed in with his own confusion. Why would he give the gold back to them? You shouldn't believe everything you hear. Zoro told him in a dull deadpan. You'd think a liar would know better. I think he would eat my oden now. Gonzo said mournfully, looking at his friend's remains. He had told them the story of how the two of them had been friends with children. Woonen had wanted to sail out and acquire gold, while Gonzo just wanted to make people happy with his oden. In the end, they were separated by an accident that led Woonen to believe that Gonzo was dead. This whole adventure was weird and kinda boring. Luffy muttered to himself. XXXXX. Luffy had been through the whole rigmarole of escaping Logatown and going to the Grand Line enough times that no longer paid attention to it. Hey, there's a resort island on the way to Reverse Mountain. We should make a stop there and relax for a bit. Nami said. This unusual statement made him immediately pay attention. Chapter 14. Hey, have any of you ever heard of the Trump Pirates? Luffy asked after they kicked Arlong's ass. Nami and Zoro confirmed that they had heard of them and shared what details they knew. Supposedly a very tough crew that hung around somewhere between Logatown and Reverse Mountain. Let's try to stay out of their way. Luffy said with a frown, disliking the words even as he said them. The future Pirate King should not be avoiding anyone, but he just didn't have time to play around with a bunch of small fry. Oi, Luffy, are you okay? Usopp asked seriously. You've insisted on sticking your nose into everything so far. Yes, he'd done that because his crew needed the experience, or because it was important to them, not because he had any particular desire to keep repeating the same adventures over and over. Frankly, if it wasn't for them he would have just skipped right over to the Grand Line. They're just not worth it. He said blandly. Why bother fighting a bunch of weaklings that thought you could become Pirate King by playing around in the weakest sea? XXXXX. Alas, despite his intentions, it didn't go that way. Once again, they were waylaid by the Trump pirate armada on their way to Reverse Mountain. And once again, the Going Merry sustained crippling damage during the battle because of all the bombs they used. On the next run, they charted a more circuitous route towards Reverse Mountain, only to once again be intercepted with the same results. By the third run and the third route, Luffy was getting suspicious.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Why were they running into this stupid pirate armada no matter where they went? He brought it up to his crew, and that was when Zoro spoke the fatal words. Maybe it's fate. The swordsman shrugged, not thinking much of his words. While he did believe in fate, he also believed in challenging it. But to Luffy it meant something else entirely. He valued freedom more than anything. Freedom to live his life on his own terms and to make his own choices. This time loop business already grated on him because he couldn't continue his adventure, but the fact that he had died, that the adventure had ended, made it tolerable. Getting out of the time loop with all of his nakama alive was a whole new adventure. All the frustration would be worth it in the end. However, being forced to have an adventure. Being pushed to deal with the Trump pirates and whatever they were doing. That was unacceptable. Outraged at having something as petty as fate decide his course for him, Luffy became determined to defy it out of sheer spite. XXXXX. Luffy's first idea to stick it to fate was a bit out of character, but he really wanted to get on with his proper adventure already. After beating up the jerk with the steel jaw, whose name got less and less important with every reset, he demanded that the next highest-ranking Marine call up the Logatown headquarters. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "Hey, this is Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King." Luffy responded, ignoring the facepalms from Zoro, Kobe, and the Marines. "You've got the Trump pirates right next to you. Why don't you go beat them up?" There was a long moment of silence, followed by the click of someone hanging up. Luffy put down the Den Den Mushi's Taki thing and looked at everyone with confusion. Why did he hang up? XXXXX. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "Hey, this is Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King, and this is not a prank call." Luffy responded, once again ignoring the facepalms from Zoro, Kobe, and the Marines. "You've got the Trump pirates right next to you. Why don't you go beat them up?" There was a long moment of silence, followed by the click of someone hanging up. "Damn it, I told him it wasn't a prank call." Luffy shouted angrily. Zoro, Kobe, and the Marines facepalmed again. XXXXX. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "This is Monkey D. Luffy, a hero." Luffy figured it was worth a try. "I'm going to beat up every pirate in the East Blue." "That's nice for you." Smoker interjected in an incredibly disinterested tone and hung up before Luffy could even say his full piece. "Damn it," Luffy yelled. XXXXX. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "This is Monkey D. Luffy, a hero, and this is not a prank call." Luffy figured it was worth a try. "You have pirates on your doorstep." "Really?" Smoker didn't sound like he believed it. "Yeah, the Trump pirates, led by some guy calling himself the Bear King." "Not my jurisdiction." XXXXX. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "This is Monkey D. Luffy, and I know all." Luffy proclaimed dramatically. "And right now I know that you should get off your ass and beat up the Trump pirates." Smoker hung up with a disgusted exhale of smoke. XXXXX. "This is Captain Smoker. What is it?" A brusque voice answered. "This is Monkey D. Luffy, and I bet I can beat up more pirates than you." Luffy challenged. After consulting his crew, he had been informed that Smoker probably had orders to stay in Logatown, and that his pursuit of the Straw Hats had probably been in violation of those orders. Nami had suggested that pricking the man's pride might work. Alas, none of them realized that Smoker was driven less by pride and more by fear of what Luffy might become after hearing him proclaim that he would be Pirate King. Luffy also hadn't realized that Smoker didn't always chase him, nor did he correlate when it did happen with his own antics in Logatown. They were working with incomplete information. Smoker's response was to hang up again. XXXXX. "Why not just go along with it?" Nami asked in exasperation after all her suggestions to deal with the issue were shot down. "Even if you reset again, you'll at least know more about the situation." "Because I don't wanna," Luffy said petulantly. Belying his childish response was the will of a man determined to live life on his own terms. "How many times have you looped back already?" the navigator asked. "I didn't count." Luffy shrugged. "A lot of times, then." She nodded firmly to herself. "You can't have spent all those loops just beating your head against the wall." Recalling Robin's words that he probably could eventually defeat the time loops that way, but that it would drive him crazy, Luffy nodded reluctantly. "No, I tried to be clever." Nami ignored how he said the word as if it tasted sour. "Well then, be clever again. I know it makes you angry to feel like you're being forced to do this, but sometimes you have to put up with it to reach your goals." She was obviously referring to her own situation with Arlong, which at this point had not yet been resolved. Luffy sulked and did not reply, thinking of how he could skip the annoying adventure that seemed to be blocking his way. XXXXX. Weeks later, the Straw Hats were once again sailing out of Logatown when they spotted the resort island. Having not come up with any ideas to get past the Trump pirate armada without the Going Merry suffering critical damage, Luffy allowed them to weigh anchor just off the coast and take a break. Every moment they spent here grated on him, knowing that it meant they would likely be too late to save Laboon or Vivi. Luffy was not normally a man to keep to a schedule or bother himself with keeping time, but these time loops had forced that consideration on him. It grated on him even more that it felt like there was no way out of it. Either the Mary got damaged in their attempts to break past the Trump pirates or they would waste too much time with them. His crew had no such worries weighing down their minds and just enjoyed the beach. Zoro did push-ups, Usopp went to get a volleyball, and Nami accepted Sanji's offer to apply suntan lotion to her back. Luffy was so busy glaring at the horizon that it did not immediately register on his mind that he was seeing their ship sailing away into the distance. In fact, it didn't register at all. It was only when Usopp came back with the ball that anyone realized their ship was sailing away without them. "Oi, someone stole the Going Merry," he yelled. Luffy woke up from his sulk, eyes bulging in shock. "Stolen? You were looking right at it." Zoro, Nami, and Sanji roared at him. Had this been his first run, Luffy would not have had sufficient mastery of his devil fruit to do more than try stretching out his hand and failing to reach the ship. But now his Gum Gum rocket, honed through many catapults, much to the suffering of his crew, had excellent precision. Besides, even if he missed, the worst that would happen is another reset, which would happen if they lost their ship anyway. So Luffy planted his hands on the rock he'd been sitting on, backed up to get some distance, and launched himself at their ship. Like an angry rubber missile, he hit the sail and slid down to the deck. "Don't steal my ship," he roared, clobbering the guy behind the wheel. "Boruto," a little kid yelled, jumping at Luffy aggressively, only to get pushed to the deck and stepped on to keep him in place. "Akisu," the newly named Boruto asked, holding a hand to his aching head. "Wait, please, I'm sorry for trying to steal your ship. Don't hurt my brother." "Brother," Luffy repeated, looking down at the angry boy wriggling under his foot. XXXXX. After being forced to turn back and pick up the rest of the Straw Hats, Boruto was forced to explain himself. His intention had been to frame the Trump pirates for the theft and get the Straw Hats to fight them. They're basing themselves on Clockwork Island. You were supposed to be a distraction while we stole the diamond clock. He finished his explanation. "The famous diamond clock," Nami exclaimed greedily. "The finest jewel and the greatest artifact ever crafted. The most valuable clock in the world. That's our knowledgeable Nami-san." Sanji simped. "Ah, so if someone was able to steal it, he really would be the world's greatest thief." Usopp pontificated. "Are clocks really that valuable?" Luffy wondered to himself. This was the first time he was hearing about clocks being good for anything except telling time. "Luffy, we need to get that clock," Nami insisted. "Hey, Boruto is the one who's going to steal the diamond clock." Akisu snapped. "He couldn't even steal our ship." Nami mocked him, pulling down her eyelid and sticking out her tongue. "The diamond clock will be mine." When the two of them devolved into bickering insults, Luffy and Zoro noticed that Boruto didn't seem particularly upset by the notion. If anything, he looked relieved. "Listen, I've studied the movements of the Trump pirates' patrols and can sail you past them to Clockwork Island. What say we go there together and see who can steal the diamond clock first?" Boruto suggested. "Deal." Nami instantly agreed, certain that it was as good as hers. Luffy said nothing, merely staring at Boruto. XXXXX. As it would happen, Boruto really did manage to sail them past the Trump pirates into Clockwork Island. They anchored the Going Merry a good distance away and then approached with a smaller and much stealthier raft. Luffy, despite his annoyance at being forced on this adventure, thought that the ridiculous giant spiral pillar holding up Clockwork Island was pretty cool. Did they walk up and down those stairs every time they want to sail somewhere? Usopp asked incredulously. "No, there's an elevator shaft running through the central pillar," Boruto explained as they hit the sand. "The stairs are full of deadly traps, so we'll need to wait for the Trump siblings to bring down the elevator for us." "That's boring," Luffy declared, already going up the stairs. His crew followed behind him. "Oi, I told you already that the stairs are full of deadly traps." Boruto yelled. "Do you wanna die?" "Yeah, do you wanna die?" Akisu parroted indignantly. "I'm not waiting," Luffy explained. The other Straw Hats, well used to how their captain operated by now, followed without a word. None of them bothered pointing out that waiting to hijack the elevator would probably be faster. As Boruto had warned, the staircase was indeed full of traps. Spikes, boulders, water, and more. In a different timeline, they would have had to deal with all of that without their gear, which would make things quite problematic. As it was, they had only mild difficulty overcoming the obstacles. The sheer length of the climb was the worst obstacle of all, really. But they did eventually make it up to Clockwork Island high in the sky, and the first thing they did was wander around town grabbing food and looking at the various clockwork devices. Luffy and Usopp were inevitably drawn to what appeared to be a toy store of some sort, pulling the rest of the crew along. "Oh, visitors. It's been a long time since we had visitors," a man and woman with crazy hair and lab coats said placidly, sipping coffee. "We're here to kick Bear King's ass and take the diamond clock," Luffy said unenthusiastically, still annoyed at being forced to have this adventure. If it was his choice it would be one thing, but now he just wanted to get it over with. If you can do that, we would be most grateful. The woman said without any real energy. You don't care if we take the diamond clock? Nami asked, confused. People were normally upset when they were stolen from. We made that clock to commemorate the birth of our child, but then the Trump siblings came and occupied our island.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
We sent him away so that he could live free of their tyranny. Now the diamond clock is nothing but a reminder of what we lost. They explained sadly. That's cruel. Akisu mumbled. Boruto had a very different reaction, though. His was the face of a man that had just realized something. And Zoro had been paying attention. The thief had already admitted to wanting to set them against the Trump pirates when they first met, and he had proved unusually well informed about their operations. Frankly, he had thought that the man was an agent of the Trump pirates, but now he had a different idea. Oi, the swordsman said, getting everyone's attention. Didn't you say you picked up Akisu in a basket floating on the ocean, with a clockwork music box in with him? Akisu had played with his little music box on the trip to Clockwork Island, leading to an explanation of its origins. How is sending an infant to drift randomly across the sea a good idea? Usopp muttered to himself, wondering at this parenting strategy. You're my parents? Akisu asked in shock, bringing out his music box. The man and woman stood up and approached, tears already forming in their eyes. That's the music box we left with our son. You survived, thank heavens. So I was right, Boruto said, shoulders slumping slightly in relief as he turned to his little brother. Akisu, I've long suspected that Clockwork Island was your home. My claims of wanting to steal the diamond clock were a lie. I just wanted to defeat the Trump pirates so that you could return. What are you talking about? My home is with you, Boruto. Akisu yelled. Then it's settled. Nami said firmly. We'll go beat up the Trump pirates, you two can settle down here, and I get the diamond clock. We would be happy to have you. The engineer woman quickly said, more than willing to accept the grown man that had taken in her son as family. That's right. Her husband agreed. Boruto stumbled, having not expected this. When he had hatched this plan to return Akisu to his home, he had imagined that he would go back out to sea while his adopted little brother stayed behind with his blood family. It had never occurred to him that he might be invited to stay as well. I appreciate the offer, but I am a man of the sea. So am I, Akisu declared, not willing to be separated from his brother. You can still consider Clockwork Island your home. The woman offered again, unwilling to let go of her son quite that easily. Even men of the sea need to come ashore once in a while, don't they? That was a much harder offer to refuse, and even mentioning that they were thieves didn't deter the desperate parents. Luffy, meanwhile, had somewhat lost interest in the family reunion. Normally, he might have tested Akisu's resolve, as he disliked helping cowards and weaklings, but he really just wanted to get this side adventure over with. Hey, is that where Bear King is? He asked, pointing at the weird, spiraling, card-themed castle at the center of the island. Do we have to walk up another staircase to get there? No, we'll have to take an alternative way up. Boruto said, relieved to extract himself from the conversation about being adopted into Akisu's blood family. The ground around the castle is filled with landmines. XXXXX. The alternative was a basket suspended on a long wire leading up to the castle, dragged along by a parachute and Boruto's skill at catching the wind. The basket was more a little cramped with 7 of them squeezed into it. Akisu had insisted on coming along, despite the entreaties of his rediscovered parents. Boruto had looked like he wanted to suggest that he stay behind as well, but apparently didn't want to insult his resolve. Luffy could certainly respect that. Oh my, you're still alive. A familiar female voice said poutily as a light purple liquid poured out of a nearby faucet. It's the sexy lady, Sanji simped, almost falling out of the basket. Oi, get a grip. Usopp complained as he grabbed him by the waist. Alogia. Luffy tilted his head, having not expected to see one of those outside the Grand Line again. That's right, the fluid fruit, to be precise. Honey Queen bragged. Boo Jack, reward them. Yes, reward me. Sanji slobbered, not quite registering that it wouldn't be Honey Queen doing the rewarding. Zoro, having his swords in hand, easily deflected the tricky spiked ball Boo Jack threw at them. Love cook. Those two words, combined with the realization that he'd almost been rewarded by a spherical fat man, were enough to snap Sanji out of his love mode. Oi, Marino, you trying to pick a fight? You turned down your reward. Honey Queen pouted, jumping up from the wires she'd been balancing on so that she was level with the basket. Her tone turned menacing. You shouldn't have. Luffy, by now a veteran of many strange battles, saw what was coming. While he didn't know if the light purple stuff making up Honey Queen's body was poisonous or not, he knew that he couldn't let it get to his crew. Lacking a means of dealing with a Logia, there was only one thing he could do. Jumping forward and opening his maw wide, the rubber man chomped on the blonde woman. Oi, Luffy, that's not how you eat a woman. Sanji roared in outrage. Zoro facepalmed, while the others just blushed at the implications. Nami, face red, brought the hammer of her fist down on their cook's head. There is a child present. But the damage was done. Akisu looked around in confusion. There's a proper way to eat a woman. I'll explain when you're older. Boruto dodged. Luffy didn't have time to reply to Sanji's criticism, although he too was wondering the same thing as Akisu. Having jumped out of the basket, he now had no choice but to stretch his arms and Tarzan his way the remaining distance to the castle. Inside him, he felt Honey Queen panicking and using her devil fruit power to try escaping. Since everything about him was rubber, including his sinuses, this succeeded. The fluid woman forcibly ejected herself from his nostrils and fell gracelessly down towards the minefield. Zoro was just barely able to stop Sanji from jumping down to save her, much to the chef's outrage. Boo Jack, seeing that the situation was very much against him, fled back to the castle to report to Bear King. XXXXX. Bear King was not at all happy when he received word that his crew was getting curb-stomped by the invaders. He was even less happy when he looked out the window and saw them doing it, easily fighting their way through the hundreds of low-ranking pirates under his flag. The traps in his castle fared no better. The Straw Hats, properly prepared and equipped and having received some training from the time looping Luffy, had no trouble either avoiding or brute forcing their way past the traps. The only good news was that his king cannon was completed, which gave him a sense of victory and invincibility. After all, this was the weapon that he believed would allow him to conquer all the seas and become Pirate King. So it was that when the Straw Hats made it to his throne room, he had all his officers gathered to greet them minus the already defeated Honey Queen with himself behind the cannon. You brats gave me a lot of trouble, but it ends here. Bear King said angrily. With my king cannon complete, nobody can stand in my way. I will be the Pirate King. Are you dumb? Luffy asked, tilting his head sideways in confusion. This prompted deadpan stares from his whole crew, plus Boruto and Akisu. What? Bear King echoed in outrage. It had been a long time since anyone dared be so insolent towards him. Yeah, dumb. Luffy took it as a request to explain. First of all, I'm going to be the Pirate King. Second, how would one stupid cannon help you do anything? It couldn't even hurt the fluid girl you've got on your crew and she was super weak. There's plenty of other Logia Devil Fruit users on the Grand Line, you know. Bear King had honestly not considered that. His entire thought process had been, big cannon go boom. Faced with this conundrum, he resolved it in the only way a man of his vast intelligence could. Shut up. He roared and fired the cannon. Luffy was an old pro at dealing with cannon fire. Just because this cannon was slightly bigger than the average ship cannon made no difference. Sucking in air until he was a giant balloon, he relied on his crew to hold him in place while the cannon shell hit him. To be fair, it was a much more powerful shell than one fired from a normal cannon, and carried an explosive payload instead of simply being an iron ball. Still, it had been designed to explode on either a timer or upon hitting something sufficiently hard. Luffy's rubbery, air-filled gut was not sufficiently hard. The shell bounced, as cannon shells tend to do when faced with this trick, and rebounded right back at Bear King and his wide-eyed crew. One should note that the king cannon was not supposed to be fired indoors, which was something that Bear King had forgotten in his fury. The explosion obliterated the throne room and a large chunk of the castle below. The Trump siblings had just enough time to realize that they fucked up before being wiped from existence. The Straw Hats, meanwhile, had fortuitously still been behind and inflated Luffy and remained untouched by the explosion. Their captain was both quite tough and his rubbery constitution means that the shockwaves produced by the king cannon were significantly less dangerous to him. On top of that was his rudimentary skill with armament hockey, which gave him extra durability and prevented any real damage. They were still sent flying out of the castle, though. Luffy had to grab most of them to keep them close, and then they used his body as a parachute to drift over Clockwork Island. Uh-oh. Boruto gulped, looking down. Uh-oh. Nami echoed. What do you mean, uh-oh? Clockwork Island is kept stable by giant gears, and I think we just destroyed the control mechanism. He explained with dread, seeing said giant gears grinding to a halt. Ah, that's too bad. It was a cool island. Luffy commented blandly, watching as the island began to tilt. He might have been more upset if he couldn't see the people already jumping off and opening parachuted. They'd clearly been prepared for this. No, the sexy lady. Sanji wailed, staring down at the clearly panicking form of Honey Queen as she kept triggering the land mines in her rush to escape. It didn't really hurt her since she was a Logia, but it blew her apart and forced her to waste time pulling herself together. Time that she didn't have. She's the enemy, Love Cook. Forget about her. Zoro grunted mercilessly. We can save her and she'll swear eternal loyalty to our crew. Sanji argued. Let me down there. The lady needs her chivalrous knight. I can teach her how to cook and she'll grow to love me. She's not a good person. I don't want her on my crew. Luffy decreed, as immune to the charms of women as ever. She'll become a good person. But Luffy remained unmoved. His crew would have only cool people on it, so Honey Queen was left to topple into the ocean alongside Clockwork Island. Sanji wailed dramatically at the loss of the sexy lady, but was not actually crippled by grief. He only sulked for a few days. XXXXX. Luffy was not surprised when he woke up back on his dinghy, and merely released an annoyed sigh. As he had expected, the little side adventure on Clockwork Island had delayed them enough that they missed saving Laboon. XXXXX. Omake, curses. The world he'd ended up in through some means was so boring and weak that Luffy was in desperate need of something even remotely interesting. That was why he insisted on traveling with the undead crew of the Black Pearl to this dead island of theirs and the cursed gold. He'd always wondered what it was like to be a skeleton. After the pummeling they received the first time, Barbossa didn't argue. In fact, he thought this was probably for the best. If the absurdly strong stretchy man was also cursed, then they would technically be on the same side as soon as he got bored of being undead. And he seemed to have a very short attention span, so it shouldn't take long. Jack Sparrow, Will Turner, and Elizabeth Swann had already given up on trying to make sense of the situation and were just going along for the ride. They were still wondering how the green-haired swordsman had managed to get so lost on a ship that he disappeared. So, this is the cursed gold, Luffy said with a careless grin. Aye, cursed by the heathen Aztec gods to punish Cortez and his men. Barbossa explained grandly. Take a single coin from that chest and ye will be as cursed as the rest of us. Luffy took a single coin from the chest and brought it up to his eye, peering at the skull embossed on it. So cool. I can't wait to make a skull joke. He stood under the moonlight with the coin in hand, eagerly waiting for the transformation. Instead, he got what felt like a tummy ache. I feel weird, he said, pressing a hand to his stomach. A few seconds later, his skin started to steam. Then the coin in his hand started to vibrate, along with all the other cursed coins, strongly enough to make the stone chest rumble ominously. Hector, mate, is this normal? Jack asked dubiously. Nay, Barbossa replied, just as dubiously. Luffy growled in pain, clenching his teeth as he fell to his knees. He glared furiously at the cursed gold. Then every single cursed coin exploded. I would like an explanation, Jack said plaintively a minute later, amid the pained groans of the Black Pearl's crew. Captain, I can feel pain again. One of the crewmen pointed out, standing up. And I'm not a skeleton. I think the curse is gone. It's gone. It is. 3 cheers for Monkey D. Luffy, the destroyer of the curse. They cheered happily. Barbossa had been somewhat closer to the chest and pulled himself to his feet with a good deal more difficulty. He had been hoping that his first sensation after getting rid of the curse would be the juicy taste of green apples, but pain would have to do. Captain Luffy, I don't suppose you know why the cursed cold would explode when it tried to curse ye. Barbossa didn't have much hope there. He'd gotten the impression that Luffy wasn't much of a thinker. Luffy went into a thinking pose for a few minutes, then smacked himself in the head. Ah, I'm already cursed. If you eat 2 devil fruits, you explode, so maybe that's what happened. It's a good thing that the gold exploded instead of me, that would have sucked she. Looking at the laughing lunatic that had apparently nearly killed himself with his thoughtlessness, Barbossa could only turn his eyes skyward. Alas, he didn't think that God was going to be much inclined to spare him from this idiocy. Captain, Pintle started hesitantly. I'm thinking that maybe we should make Luffy the captain. Yeah, Ragetti agreed. No offense, but he finished by gesturing vaguely in the rubber man's direction, not sure how to properly encompass his sheer Luffiness. Barbossa couldn't even be upset. More exasperated and speechless than anything. That reminds me. Jack piped up, drew his gun, and shot Barbossa in the heart. Now Barbossa was upset, and the sour look he shot his former captain as he collapsed let him know it. Chapter 15. Luffy had been told many times, emphatically and at length, that he was a dumbass. While it wasn't something he was proud of, it also wasn't something he was ashamed of. Being stupid just meant that you had to leave the thinking to your smarter friends. And offloading his thinking to other people was something he was always glad to do. The time loop situation had forced him to do more thinking than he liked, but he still relied heavily on his friends to figure stuff out. So this situation with the Trump pirates keeps happening, but El Drago isn't showing up anymore. Nami summarized thoughtfully. Sounds like whatever is causing the time loops intends to back off after you completely master the challenge. Usopp pondered. Makes sense. Zoro grunted, and to him it did. Why keep repeating the same thing over and over if it wasn't challenging anymore? I want to know more about this sexy lady that future me wanted in the crew. Sanji contributed, puffing on his cigarette and acting cool. What are her sizes? About this. Luffy held a palm slightly above his own head. I meant her 3 sizes, her golden ratio. Sanji made an hourglass shape with his hands, his composure beginning to crack as his perverted nature began to take over. Why would she have 3 sizes? Luffy asked, confused and a little annoyed. And if you want to know about gold, then ask Nami. Yes, Sanji-kun, why don't you ask me about her golden ratio? Nami smiled sweetly. Like any man, Sanji felt the hand of death upon him at her tone. A sensible man would have backpedaled and made excuses. Sanji was not a sensible man. Making kissy faces at the navigator, he began to noodle about in delight. Oh, Nami-kwan, are you jealous? Fear not, your gallant knight has enough love for all the beautiful ladies of the sea. Oi, maybe you could bring this woman onto the crew for just one loop and pump her for information about the Trump pirates. Usopp suggested, staunchly ignoring the war crimes Nami was committing on Sanji in the background. He was especially ignoring Sanji's mixed cries of pain and pleasure. Just take her prisoner and interrogate her. Zoro said sharply. We are not making nakama under false pretenses. Luffy's distasteful expression cleared up at his first mate's words. Zoro understood. They'd never taken anyone prisoner before, but it was much better than offering Honey Queen a place in the crew just to use her. Usopp's idea about questioning her had merit otherwise. Does it have to be the liquid girl? He asked, scratching his cheek. We could take any of them. No, Sanji screamed from the floor. It definitely has to be the sexy lady. She sounds like the brains of the operation. From the way Luffy described these Trump pirates, you're probably right, but I can't help but think that it's not your main concern. Usopp deadpanned. Love cook. Zoro scoffed. XXXXX. Having already successfully done this song and dance before, the assault on Clockwork Island went like clockwork. Puns, quips, jokes. In any case, the Trump pirates were thoroughly defeated. The only difference was that when Luffy chomped Honey Queen, they had a big jar ready. When the fluid woman forced her way out of his sinuses, it was right into captivity. So stuffed into a container much smaller than her human body, she wasn't able to transform back, and her Logia form allowed her no physical strength. As the Straw Hats sailed away from Clockwork Island, the interrogation began. Tell us all about the Trump pirates. Luffy made an extremely vague demand. Why? You already killed them. Honey Queen sulked, no trace of her previous sensually teasing cadence in her voice. Granted, it was hard to be sexy when you were a mass of fluid stuffed into a jar. Because we'll kill you too if you don't. Zoro threatened mercilessly. Don't threaten a lady. Sanji roared in outrage, trying to kick him. And what will happen to me if I do? Honey Queen asked as the swordsman and chef devolved into one of their frequent fights. Is your captain going to keep me as a bedwarmer? Or am I to be passed around as entertainment for your entire crew? But I sleep in a hammock. Luffy tilted his head in confusion. Oi, Luffy, that's not what she meant. Usopp tried to explain, supremely awkward thanks to the insinuation. What did she mean, then? And that was when Usopp realized that he had blundered. We'll just let you go. Nami took over, seeing that all the menfolk were going to be completely useless for one reason or another. Just like that, Honey Queen was extremely skeptical. Just like that, Nami confirmed. We don't really care about you, we just want to know about the Trump pirates. But why? Honey Queen pressed, confused. The Trump pirates are gone, thanks to you. I'm stuck in a time loop and I need to beat them faster. Luffy revealed. Why are you telling things to the prisoner? That's not how interrogations are supposed to work. Usopp karate chopped him in the head. Is that right? Honey Queen purred. While the statement sounded ridiculous, they really had no reason to lie to her and their captain didn't strike her as the cunning sort. Even if he was simply insane, it still meant that he and his crew believed it. In that case, then no, I don't think I'll be telling you anything. They might not be as close as the Straw Hats, but they had called themselves the Trump siblings for a reason. If push really came to shove, they would have still turned on each other, but it hadn't and Honey Queen was spiteful enough to keep her mouth shut just to inconvenience them. Luffy. Nami growled, just glaring angrily for a few seconds. Then she slumped with a gusty sigh. Ah, whatever. You're the one who's going to need to suffer another loop because you can't keep your mouth shut. Maybe it'll teach you something. Of course, they still tried to incentivize Honey Queen to spill the beans, but the problem was that they really didn't have much to offer or threaten with. Even with no proof of the time loop, the blonde fluid woman still just kept on delaying until the timer ran out. XXXXX. The next time around, Luffy was extra sulky, but they did capture Honey Queen again. This time, he just sat his special seat and stared out across the ocean as his crew did the interrogating. To be more precise, Nami and Zoro did the interrogating, playing the roles of bad cop and worse cop. That got through to the fluid woman much better than the confused interaction of the first time and she revealed everything, seeing little point in keeping secrets since the Trump pirates were already defeated. The problem then was actually using the knowledge. To Nami, genius that she was, the information on fleet patrols was as simple as basic arithmetic. To Luffy, it was an incomprehensible eldritch tongue spoken by higher dimensional beings. No matter how he tried to memorize it, the whole thing got jumbled in his head and turned useless. And that wasn't even everything. They also extracted information on the traps, and perhaps most importantly, the operation of the elevator that would allow one to skip it all. Needless to say, the Straw Hats ran afoul the Trump Pirates Armada once again when they attempted to follow Luffy's directions. That incident necessitated a change of plans. XXXXX. It took a frustrating few loops to figure out a proper plan to minimize the amount of time it took them to deal with the Trump Pirates. This plan also ran into some difficulties. The numbers are. Luffy exploded out of the barrel he had been riding in, quickly pummeling the 3 Alvida pirates unconscious. Ah, Kobe screamed in fear and fell on his ass. The numbers are. Luffy tried to remember the number for the mechanical security keypad on Clockwork Island's elevator, but he had fallen asleep in the barrel. Crap, I forgot again. XXXXX. The next loop, Luffy stubbornly refused to fall asleep and spent the entire time repeating the numbers to himself. Give me a pen and paper. He roared as he exploded out of the barrel, knocking out the 3 Alvida pirates and grabbing Kobe by the shoulders, screaming in his face. AAAAAH. Kobe panicked and passed out in fear. By the time Luffy woke him up, the numbers had all gotten jumbled in his head again. XXXXX. Hey, do you know where I could get a pen and paper? Luffy asked politely after he knocked out the 3 Alvida pirates. What? Kobe blinked in confusion, utterly baffled by the non-sequitur. Pen and paper. Luffy repeated, significantly less patiently. Conditioned to obey at the first sign of anger, Kobe snapped to attention immediately. Alright, I think there should be some this way. Thank you. A couple of weeks and several boringly well-worn adventures later, the crew was back at Clockwork Island, having once again used the services of Boruto and Akisu to evade the patrols. Alright, this is it, Nami said, peering at the keypad. It was some impressive-looking technology, as expected of Clockwork Island. She punched in the numbers written down on the piece of paper Luffy had handed her, pointedly ignoring how crumpled and sweat-stained it was, along with the barely legible writing. Nothing happened. They all looked at it for a second, then Nami woodenly turned her head to stare at the rubber man. Luffy, are you sure this is right? I think so, he replied uncertainly. In truth, he'd gotten the numbers jumbled up again while repeating them to himself in the barrel, never even realizing it. They tried waiting for one of the Trump siblings to eventually use the elevator, but that just resulted in a chaotic mess of a battle. XXXXX. This time, when Luffy awoke on his dinghy, the first thing he did was break off a piece of wood and use the sharp end to carve the numbers into his arm. He just couldn't trust his brain to keep them straight in his head. That ended in another failure, as it turned out that Luffy had jumbled up the numbers before the loop even reset. He spent the remaining loop time writing the numbers into the sand of the beach with a piece of driftwood. His original idea had been to keep carving it into his arm over and over again, but he had received a fist to the head and been informed of what a dumbass he was. There was no need to mutilate himself when writing into the sand would achieve the same thing. XXXXX. When the door of the elevator gave off a pleasant ding and opened, Luffy fell to his knees in relief. Yes, he cried, glad that it was finally over. This whole time loop business had been infuriating in many ways, but to be defeated by a bunch of numbers was perhaps the worst so far. Get in here already. Nami yanked him, greedy for the diamond clock. As soon as he was inside, she pushed the button that would take them all the way up. Shitty rubber. Sanji ground his teeth and tried to squeeze himself towards the only female present. I should be the one pressed up against Nami Swan. His maneuvering resulted in much grumbling in the tightly packed elevator. Then there was an ominous sound of groaning metal. Wait, what kind of carrying capacity does this thing have? Usopp asked with a sense of dread. It had occurred to him that the Trump siblings only numbered 5, and Bear King was far too large to fit into the elevator. There were currently 7 of them squashed into it. The remaining 4, although somewhat bulky in the case of Boo Jack and Skunk One, were not especially heavy. The engineers of Clockwork Island, clever as they were, had not thought to include a weight sensor. They had, in fact, been hoping that Bear King would use the elevator and fall to his doom. No such luck, as the captain of the Trump pirates barely ever left his castle since it was built. The elevator's machinery gave out on the Straw Hats about halfway up to their destination, sending them falling to their doom. Not all of them were killed or seriously injured, but the loop was still a failure. Even worse, Luffy had long since erased the combination from his mind, not caring to remember it after he'd written it down. The Alvida of the next loop never learned why the skinny stretchy kid beat her and her crew so viciously. XXXXX. Luffy's irritation was not improved when, on the way to the Baratie, Wunan and Treasure Island was mentioned. Why are you talking about him? We already did that stupid side adventure. He whined. You mean we found Wunan's gold? Nami was instantly all over the implication. There is no gold anymore, he gave it all back. Luffy grumped. That idiot, how dare he give away my gold? She screeched. When a familiar trio of thieves tried to rob them, they got pummeled quite severely. And when El Drago tried to practice his devil fruit near them, he got pummeled even worse. Thus was the side adventure averted before it could even get started. XXXXX. After a couple loops more, the Straw Hats were finally back at the elevator with the correct combination. This time, there would be no stupid deaths. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji were the only ones that went up, not wanting to risk overburdening the elevator. The gentle rattle of metal announced their arrival at the top of Trump Castle. To their surprise, there were only 3 of the Trump siblings there. Unbeknownst to them, Boruto's evasive maneuvers and their lack of encounter with Honey Queen had allowed them to beat the patrolling armada to the island. Roronoa Zoro, Pin Joker exclaimed in shocked anger, staring at the green-haired swordsman. Do I know you? Zoro asked in confusion. How can you not remember? You were the one who gave me this scar. Pin Joker shouted, even more angry. I don't remember weaklings. Zoro dismissed him. I'll make you remember. Pin Joker roared, brandishing his sword. Time for some back pay. You mean payback? Being corrected didn't help his temper any, and he launched himself into a thrust with his rapier. Everyone else ignored the two sword users as they started fighting. Who are you? Bear King demanded irritably. Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King. I'm here to kick your ass. Luffy told him blandly. Future Pirate King. Bear King and Skunk One guffawed derisively. With the power of my King Cannon, I will be the Pirate King. You're not even a real pirate. The rubber man dismissed him. That was about all it took to provoke Bear King into a fight. A very one-sided fight, and not in the way he expected. Bear King's Stone Fruit gave him more defensive power than just about anyone in the East Blue could deal with, but Luffy had faced off against vastly more dangerous opponents. Sanji had it even easier. Luffy had already warned everyone about Skunk One's gas attacks, so the chef never even let him get a chance to use it. A quick rush and a kick to the face was all it took. Alright, let's go. Luffy ordered once all three of the Trump siblings were defeated. He was eager to get back on track and didn't want to lose any more time. But what about the sexy lady you mentioned? Sanji protested. Leave the rest to the Marines. Zoro grunted, disappointed by how weak Pin Joker had been. This whole thing has been a disappointment. Sanji agreed, but not for the same reasons. He had really wanted to see the sexy lady that took her clothes off a lot according to Luffy. XXXXX. The Straw Hats had tried to rush their voyage as much as possible to make up for the time delay of the Clockwork Island detour. Luffy waited anxiously on the figurehead of the Going Merry as they sailed down Reverse Mountain, hoping that they were not too late. Is that a mountain? Usopp asked, squinting into the distance. Laboon. Luffy cheered, not just because he was glad to see their whale friend again, but also because this meant that they were on time. XXXXX. Omake, the Peanut Gallery. Commodore James Norrington intended to arrest all of these pirates, see them hanged, and then marry Elizabeth Swann. You are all under arrest. He declared once he had the crew of the Black Pearl, both past and present, cornered. He did find it odd that they allowed themselves to be cornered so easily, but aside from being extra careful of any shenanigans from Jack Sparrow, was not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. That said pirate was just grinning at him, along with the rest of the crew, sent a shiver of worry up his spine. Still, he had them surrounded, disarmed, and he was given to understand that they were no longer cursed to become unkillable abominations. It should be fine. It was not fine. No, the skinny boy in the straw hat said blandly, picking his nose. And who are you? The Commodore demanded. Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King. The boy replied insolently. Then you are under arrest, in the name of king and country. James insisted. You're too weak to arrest me. Well, that kind of declaration go hardly be allowed to pass unchallenged. I think that the Commodore may have made a slight miscalculation. Murtaugh, Royal Marine under the command of James Norrington, said painfully where he had fallen. That does appear to be the case. Mulroy, also a Royal Marine under the command of James Norrington, agreed just as painfully. Don't feel too bad about it, we all made that miscalculation. Pintle commiserated. I got the tar beaten out of us by Captain Luffy we did. Rigetti nodded. Good thing we was still immortal at the time. Where did you even find this man? Murtaugh asked. And what is he? Mulroy added. Jack Sparrow and Will Turner over there say they found. I am in Tortuga, eating the place out of house and home. Pintle offered. Can find all sorts in Tortuga. And, he says that he's a rubber man. There was a moment of silence between the four, punctuated only by the continued beating inflicted upon the Royal Navy. What the devil is rubber? Murtaugh demanded. No idea. Something stretchy, I reckon. Pintle shrugged. Captain said he ate a devil fruit that gave, his powers. Rigetti supplemented. The devil grows fruit and you get powers for eating them. Mulroy wondered. What, do you have to go to hell and break into the devil's private orchard to steal them? I asked that, too. Rigetti was far too happy over the fact that someone else had the same question. The captain did say that, he's been to hell, but that there were no orchards there, only pirates, marines, and crossdressers. Why would marines get sent to hell? Murtaugh demanded. We work hard to keep good folk safe from pirates. Maybe the standards for getting into heaven are too high. Rigetti shrugged. I mean, if we're all going to hell anyway, then we might as well do whatever we want, right? He makes a fair point. Mulroy conceded. If we're going to hell whether we are marines or pirates, then the pirate's life does seem to have more perks. But what if we quit the marines and don't become pirates? Murtaugh pondered. Would we be spared from going to hell? And speaking of, what does God have against crossdressers specifically? All four of them went silent as they pondered this mystery. I heard that the men in Rome wore dresses. Pintle offered. Maybe, he's still holding a grudge over them killing his son. But didn't Jesus ask God to forgive them? Rigetti asked. That's what the priest used to say. That don't mean God actually did, ya idiot. Pintle smacked him over the back of the head. I knew your pa and, he was a stubborn shite that never listened to anyone but, himself. And didn't God drown the world once because it weren't to his liking? You know, the man makes a fair point. Murtaugh said with a thoughtful frown. I know that if my son was killed by a bunch of men in dresses, I'd not be inclined to forgive them anything at all. Could it be that Christ was actually crucified by the Roman equivalent of pirates and marines, wearing dresses? You don't have a son, though. Mulroy pointed out. If I did have a son. Murtaugh snapped at him. It's a hypothetical. Nearby, Elizabeth Swann, as the most educated person present, could only despair at the increasingly more ludicrous theories the foursome of idiots was coming up with. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Rebound by Noodlehammer. Chapter 16. It had been quite some time since Luffy had gotten this far into the loop, but he still remembered the best way forward: give Robin as much information as possible and let her do all the thinking. He did forget about the stinky ointment that kept away all the nasty bugs on Little Garden, but this time around it was Zoro that got stung. The swordsman had a constitution that an ox would envy, so he was still on his feet, albeit just barely, by the time they reached Drum Island. And knowing where Kurha would show up meant that there was little danger of him expiring. The rest of the voyage went without any serious troubles and they once again reached Jaya. Cricket was easily convinced to properly reinforce their ship and send them off to the sky. And this time, Luffy remembered not to let Usopp swim in the clouds. There's a gatekeeper lady somewhere around here, Luffy dredged out of his memory. Is she sexy? Sanji noodled, imagining a beautiful and buxom woman in a tight dress and bright smile. She's old, Luffy replied. Oh, I see. Sanji instantly went back to acting cool and indifferent. While he still wouldn't kick an elderly woman, his usual enthusiasm was nowhere to be found. Does that mean we have to pay for admission? Nami asked warily. Not really. Luffy asked more than stated. He vaguely remembered something about an admission fee, but that it was also not required to pay it. That's all right then. Nami instantly cheered up at the thought of not having to part with money. Let's go get my gold. That's when Chopper suddenly screamed in fright. What's going on? Zoro asked. Chopper blubbered incoherently for a while, annoying the swordsman. Oi, calm down and speak calmly. He ordered impatiently. Chopper took a deep breath and then blurted out what he saw. There's a bull on a square cloud charging right at us. They all responded. It's a man in a strange tribal mask, a shield, and a bazooka. Usopp discerned, looking through a telescope. He's skating across the clouds. Oh, that guy. Luffy slapped a fist into his palm, remembering that they got attacked as soon as they reached the sky the first time. What was his name again? The newcomer decided to introduce himself with a flying kick right into Sanji's face, and then bouncing over to do the same to Zoro. Neither of the two powerful fighters managed to defend themselves, despite the attacks not being anything they hadn't seen before. Luffy had more luck. Although the thin air was affecting him as well, he still saw the rather telegraphed bazooka slam coming a mile away. Blue Sea Dwellers, go back to where you came from. The tribal warrior snarled as he dodged away from a return kick. I will reject you. Hey, your name is Wiper, right? Luffy finally remembered. That visibly shocked their attacker, making him reel back as if struck. But then he defaulted back to his usual emotion, anger. They didn't call him, the Berserker, for nothing. How do you know my name? But he would receive no reply, because an old man with a lance and knightly armor charged in on his pink bird, driving him off. Who is it now? Nami demanded to know. The old man dramatically landed on the Going Merry and stood tall with his lance held across his body. I am the Knight of the Sky. Oh, it's Gonfall. Luffy remembered the cool old guy. You know my name, Blue Sea Dwellers. Gonfall blinked in surprise. We're here to kick Enel's ass. Luffy declared. So, you know about him as well. Gonfall muttered, confused. Luffy, can this man be trusted? Robin asked. Yeah, he's cool. Robin nodded and turned towards the old man. Knight-san, would you care to join us for tea? We have a lot to talk about. XXXXX. Robin quickly explained the situation to the old knight, only prodding Luffy for extra information when it became clear that he'd left something out. It didn't take long for Gonfall to become convinced that the rubber captain had at least been to Skypia before and met many of its residents. Now, what can you tell me of this Wiper fellow? He seems important, she asked once their bona fides were established. He is the leader of the Shandian warriors. An angry man, who sees everyone not of Shandora as an enemy and trespasser on his people's ancestral land. The old man stroked his beard. Before Enel came, I wished to end the long war between our peoples so that we could live together in peace, but his demands were unreasonable. Luffy, do you have anything to add? Robin asked her captain. Luffy paused to swallow the roasted skyfish Sanji had made for him before answering. He's not a bad guy. He wants Cricket to hear the golden bell, too. Robin hummed, her prodigious mind already putting the pieces together. Pardon me, but who is Cricket? Gonfall asked. Mont Blanc Cricket is a descendant of Mont Blanc Noland, the great friend of Shandora and the warrior Calgara, Wiper's own ancestor. The old man asked in surprise, having learned the tale while trying to make peace with the Shandians. More pieces slotted into place. Knight-san, what can you tell me of Shandora's culture? Robin had an idea of how to get Wiper on their side. XXXXX. Canis was having a very ordinary day, until it suddenly turned very extraordinary. "Canis-chan, my beautiful angel," a blond man in a black suit exclaimed, taking great bouncy steps in her direction. Excuse me, but who are you?" she asked uncertainly, quite sure that she had never seen this strange man in her life. "I am Sanji, your knight in shining armor," he declared, kneeling before her and reaching out to grab her hand with a kissy face. "For you, I will fight God himself." Canis froze up in shock and fear. Enel had killed people for far lesser offenses than that. Jumping away from the blond man and looking at the skies in anticipation of sudden lightning bolts striking him, she failed to see the others approaching. "Sanji-kun, what did we say about first impressions?" an orange-haired girl asked sweetly. "That they were important, which is why I had to assure Canis-chan that her troubles were over now that I'm here," Sanji argued. It sounded like a very bad justification to Canis's ears. "Excuse me, Gonfal-san. Who are these people?" She tried again, this time asking Skypia's former god. "They are Blue Sea dwellers who have come to challenge Enel and ring the Great Golden Bell." Gonfal explained, as if that wasn't madness. "Yeah, we're gonna kick that jerk's ass," the boy in the straw hat yelled. "Don't dismiss them out of hand, Canis, they are quite strong," Gonfal cautioned. "May we impose on your hospitality until McKinley and his white berets come to arrest them?" Canis was still very confused, but at least she wouldn't have to feel guilty about delivering another batch of clueless people to their doom in Upper Yard, since they were already intent on going there. XXXXX. Enel was, of course, aware of the Blue Sea dwellers that had come to challenge him. He had heard their voices the moment they arrived in Skypia through his mantra. They were an amusing bunch in their fearlessness and their declaration that they had come to challenge him, although the weaker ones among them were doing a poor job of pretending they were not scared. The stronger ones were genuinely not scared. This was novel enough that he put his plans of flying to Fairyverse aside for a moment. One final amusement before boarding the Arc Maxim with his chosen few sounded perfect. To his further amusement, they chose Ohm's Ordeal of Iron despite Gonfal being with them as an advisor. A truly reckless bunch, and they didn't even think to fight him all at once, which Enel could tell would have probably overwhelmed the Iron Cloud user. No, instead the swordsman of their crew challenged his strongest priest to single combat. In a surprising turn of events, the Blue Sea swordsman proved himself the better, allowing his crew to proceed. Enel would have considered them pardoned of their crime for such a feat, but that was unnecessary since they had come to challenge him. And then the Shandians attacked. Truly, it was time to leave and ascend to Fairyverse. These mortals were getting far too arrogant, thinking they could challenge God. He would let them fight it out in a grand battle and offer the last 5 of them a place on the Arc Maxim as long as they showed him proper respect. If not, then they would be destroyed along with Skypia, just as all things who defy gods will must be. XXXXX. Wiper had known it was time as soon as Isa said that the voice of one of Enel's priests had gone silent. The Blue Sea dwellers had weakened Enel and would keep his attention long enough for him and his warriors to sweep away the rest of the trespassers. Then, once Enel and his forces were gone, he would turn his weapons on the Blue Sea dwellers and Shandora would finally once again be theirs. It was the will of the warrior Calgera and all of their ancestors. They stormed through the jungles of Upper Yard, encountering no resistance. That made them wary, but it turned out to be because everyone was gathered at the base of Giant Jack. Wiper was happy for the chance to kill all of his enemies at once. "Wiper-san, welcome." The dark-haired woman on the Blue Sea dweller crew greeted him kindly. "Mont Blanc Cricket, descendant of Mont Blanc Noland, sends his regards." Wiper reeled back in shock, having never expected to hear such a thing. A descendant of Noland lives. The man who had saved their people from a deadly disease centuries ago and forged a friendship with Calgera. "He does." The woman nodded. "He has been looking for Skypia for many years. We are here to ring the golden bell so that he can hear it." The Blue Sea dwellers were here to light the fire of Shandora and put Noland's soul to rest. That changed things. "Warriors of Shandora," he roared. "The Blue Sea dwellers are our allies. Kill Enel and his priests. Don't damage the ruins," the dark-haired woman called out sternly. XXXXX. In a different situation, where the Straw Hats were blundering about cluelessly, Enel would have come upon the idea of a survival game to decide who would be worthy of joining him on his voyage to Fairyverse. Their direct intention to challenge him and the Shandian warriors charging towards his throne sparked a different idea, a grand battle royale. It should be noted that Enel was more than a little delusional. It was only the overwhelming power of the rumble fruit that forced everyone else to go along with said delusions. Although not a stupid man, his grasp on reality and his sense of self-importance was such that he assumed everyone would go along with his battle royale idea, simply because he ordered it. He was not the slightest bit prepared for the unexpected alliance between the Straw Hats and Wiper's Shandian warriors. Still, he was too arrogant to feel any kind of concern even as his priests and lesser forces were overwhelmed. After all, he was lightning. What could harm lightning? All he felt was disgust at how weak all his servants turned out to be. And then the Blue Sea captain's fist was buried in his gut, making him feel pain for the first time since he'd eaten his devil fruit. XXXXX. Luffy had forgotten how funny Enel's shocked look was. The first time around, he had been more focused on kicking the guy's ass, but now he could help but start laughing at the bulging eyes and hanging jaw. The god retreated in a flash of lightning, that expression still on his face. "WWWW, what was that? How can you hit me? I'm lightning. Rubber beats lightning," Luffy said shortly, rolling his arm in preparation for a legendary ass kicking. "Nothing beats lightning." Enel's face darkened as he said this, followed up by a huge blast of lightning. Luffy didn't even try to dodge it, he just barreled right through and planted his foot in Enel's face. The lightning was bright, but didn't do anything. "No, it's impossible." Enel tried to deny, firing more and more blasts of lightning while retreating, and taking several more hits because of it. By now, Luffy was quite familiar with Logia Devil Fruit users that relied too heavily on the intangibility it granted to them. Robin had told him to take advantage of that as much as possible. She'd also told him that he could not let the Lightning Man get the idea to just stay away and use long-range attacks. Luffy understood this well because of what the stupid Sand Croc had done if it ever looked like he was losing. That was why, instead of just punching and kicking Enel while ignoring the attempts to blast him with lightning, Luffy used his rubbery limbs to wrap himself around the man. In a matter of moments, he had him completely immobilized. "What is this?" Enel roared in fury, turning himself to lightning in an attempt to kill the grappling rubber man. But it didn't work. Luffy wasn't hurt, nor could Enel use his powers to travel anywhere while wrapped up in a non-conducting material. When that failed, he tried to use his considerable physical strength to break free, but that also didn't work. Luffy's limbs just stretched instead of broke. "Shishishi, you're not getting away." Luffy grinned, glad that he had asked Robin for advice. He never would have thought to do this on his own. "I'm going to ring that bell." Then he pulled his head back and rammed it into Enel's. Not quite the bell he claimed he would ring, but it was a start. "Straw Hat!" Wiper suddenly roared, charging towards them. All of Enel's priests and lackeys had been overwhelmed by the combined forces of the Shandians, pirates, and Gonfall. "Hold him still." Luffy had been intending to do exactly that, so he just cocked his head sideways in curiosity at what Wiper was planning to do. The Shandian berserker roared a battlecry as he launched himself towards his enemy. One seastone-lined waver skate crashed into the god's gut, weakening him severely and toppling both him and Luffy to the ground. This was followed immediately by a hand placed over his heart. Wiper's eyes were murderous as he spoke a single word. "Reject." The force of the reject dial instantly stopped Enel's heart. XXXXX. Luffy woke up back on his dinghy, frowning at the sky. He had not known that Enel could restart his own heart. Dying because your opponent was a cowardly cheater hiding in the storm clouds above and blasting lightning at everything beneath him sucked. No wonder Robin had told him that he couldn't let Enel get the idea to just run away. XXXXX. Omake, lost samurai. Zoro frowned at his environs in confusion. Now where did they all wander off to? He asked with a scoff. His crew just kept on getting lost. Seeing a road nearby, he knew that if he followed it, he would eventually reach some kind of civilization and ask if anyone had seen his crew. They tended to attract attention, so if they were anywhere close, people will have heard of them. Unfortunately, that wasn't as simple as it sounded. Just like every other road, this one writhed and twisted, randomly disappearing under his feet. Still, he did eventually run across some kind of merchant caravan once the road reappeared. And it was being attacked by bandits, because of course it was. Figuring that saving them would get him both information and maybe a stiff drink for his parched throat, Zoro moved to engage them. Despite using swords, they were dishonorable sorts and attacked in groups. Not that it helped them at all, they were pitifully weak. "1,000 thanks, noble samurai." The leader of the merchant caravan bowed low in gratitude. "No problem." Zoro grunted. "Hey, have you seen a guy in a straw hat, a witch with orange hair, a long-nosed liar, a swirly-browed pervert, a talking raccoon, and a creepy woman with dark hair?" The merchant gaped at him in shock and confusion, so that was probably a no. I have not, but the Shogun may. At least, he may be willing to take a swordsman like yourself into his service." Zoro had no interest in going into anyone's service, but this Shogun guy sounded like a leader. That was the kind of person that Luffy often ended up punching in the face. And they might have some decent swordsmen for him to challenge. XXXXX. They had no decent swordsmen. Zoro explained to his crew once he finally found them. All of them were weak as hell. They kept begging me for training or trying to bribe me to fight for them. I think I might have accidentally conquered the whole country at some point. I don't know, I was drunk. Normally, he would never allow himself to become inebriated anywhere near potential enemies. However, those swordsmen were too weak to be considered enemies. Although they did get at least a little better by the time he finally found his crew. "You could have at least taken some of their gold with you if you conquered the country." Nami complained. XXXXX. Feudal Japan. The passage of the Demon of Three Swords had left Japan deeply unsettled, but there had been surprisingly few casualties despite that. All the shogun and their armies had been crushed with humiliating ease, deemed unworthy of even killing. Seppuku by those who could not stand the shame had taken more lives than the demon's blades. It got so bad that the emperor had needed to declare that the demon had been sent to remind the samurai of their roots just to stop them from killing themselves. It had worked, and the empire's warrior class dedicated their lives to honing their skill in unraveling what few words of wisdom the demon had spoken. When the Westerners came with their guns, it was to a Japan whose mightiest samurai were capable of parrying bullets with their blades. Chapter 17. Something was wrong. Not wrong, but different. Luffy had become quite sensitive to differences. No matter how much he was naturally inclined to ignore small details, when you keep repeating the same events, any differences became quite glaring. In this particular case, Luffy had noticed that something was different with Robin after they left Alabasta. She was reading, but not what she usually read at this time. It was an entirely different book. And yet, there was something awfully familiar about it as well. It was confusing and Luffy didn't do well with confusion, so he dealt with it the same way he dealt with everything. Directly. "Hey, Robin, what's that you're reading?" he asked. The whole crew gasped in shock. Despite all the repeats, he was still nigh allergic to the written word and more likely to spend his days sparring with Zoro and Sanji than reading. Hell, the only things he ever read was his bounty poster and maybe some street signs. It's a series of books about the rainbow mist that Nami found in Alabasta's royal library. Robin answered placidly, turning a page. Rainbow mist. Rainbow mist. Why did that sound so familiar? It took Luffy a good 30 seconds to remember. The mystery fog, he yelled. The mystery fog that does mysterious things with time. You know about the rainbow mist, Captain San. Robin raised an eyebrow curiously. We went there the first time. It was all coming back to Luffy now. It's been so long that I forgot all about it. We met Henzo and the pumpkin pirates, and there was some jerk mayor. We went into the mystery fog and ended up in some weird boat graveyard where time stayed still or something. And you didn't think to mention this, given your time looping situation. Now Robin was just plain incredulous. So was the rest of the crew, but they were content to let her do the talking for now. I forgot, Luffy declared with crossed arms and a stubborn set to his jaw. Don't be proud of it. Everyone yelled at him, except Robin. She was too cool for that. And you say that the rainbow mist did not appear in any of the loops until now. The archaeologist pressed. No. Interesting, Robin said thoughtfully. You already know what's going on. Nami and Usopp asked hopefully. Robin Swan is so smart. Sanji simped. Whoa. Chopper stared at her with sparkling eyes, super impressed. Not at all, she replied with a smile. But it seems increasingly unlikely that it is our captain's devil fruit behind this. Hopefully prodding at this mystery won't make the situation worse. Nami, Usopp, and Chopper immediately shivered at Robin's twisted smile and dark implication. Don't worry, Nami-Kwan, Robin Swan, I will protect you from anything. Sanji declared. Nobody took him seriously, although Zoro did snort derisively, setting off another fight. XXXXX. This has happened the first time, too. Luffy nodded to himself sagely as a small fleet of marine ships fired cannonballs at them. Don't just sit there, Nami yelled at him angrily. Either help Ro-or defend the ship. And then what happened? Robin asked, just as casual as Luffy. Woman, you wanted to join the crew. Why aren't you helping defend the ship? Zoro demanded. Don't make demands of a lady. Sanji roared at him, instantly turning his attention away from the cannonballs to chastise the swordsman. She doesn't have to do anything if she doesn't want to. Chopper rolled around on the deck in his ballpoint like a panicky tumbleweed. We got away somehow, Luffy replied uncertainly. I can't remember how. That was when the closest marine ship suddenly broke in half and started sinking, apparently blasted by their own allies. They fired on their own. Usopp blinked in confusion. Of course, I knew this would happen the whole time. Right, they blew up their own ship. Luffy smacked a fist into his palm as he remembered. Then we went to Ruluka Island to eat. You can eat all you want, Captain, just tell me about the rainbow mist. Robin directed him. There was an old guy scientist called Henzo, and the mayor was a huge jerk. Luffy dug through his memory. We should go kick his ass, then eat, then talk to Henzo. It wasn't the way he usually did things. Normally, he would never attack without provocation. But since he already knew that they would end up fighting, there was no reason to hold back. Sounds like a plan, Robin agreed. XXXXX. Henzo was an extremely patient man. He had tolerated working with a man he hated for 50 years. He had endured the scorn of his fellow Ruluka Islanders for the same amount of time. All of it so that he could get his friends back. And then some random pirate crew sailed into town and crushed Weten and his brats like they were nothing. As it turned out, even Henzo's patience had limits. I won't let you ruin everything. He yelled at them, hefting a flamethrower that was supposed to be an upgrade to the current one in Weten's combat suit. If these pirates pillage the island, then he might never get his friends back. We're not trying to ruin anything, we just need your expertise as a scientist. The tall dark-haired woman said. She was by far the oldest of the pirates. If not for the straw hat painted on the sails, he'd have thought her to be the captain. In return, we will gladly help you get to Ape's concert. Now she had Henzo's full attention. "You know about the Rainbow Mist and Apes concert?" he asked, rage and frustration giving way to interest. "Our captain has been there before." She nodded towards the young man in the straw hat. "He has, in fact, met you before. I think I would remember that." Henzo gave her a flat look. He might be getting old, but his mind wasn't going yet. "I'm stuck in a time loop," the man in the straw hat said. "Every time I die or lose one of my nakama, I get sent back to the start of my adventure. It's so annoying." If it wasn't for the fact that he had spent 50 years studying a phenomenon, Henzo would have dismissed the pirate as insane. Plus, he was desperate enough to get his friends back so that he'd take any chance. "Tell me about this time loop," he almost demanded. XXXXX. The Rainbow Mist showed up soon enough that Henzo wasn't able to question Luffy as thoroughly as he would have liked. To be fair, Henzo was a scientist and would probably poke and prod an experiment for years if given the chance. As it was, he only managed to get a mostly coherent overview from Luffy's rambling explanation before it was time to sail into the Rainbow Mist. Without any interference from Weten and his brood, they experienced no problems. Even the reunion with the Pumpkin Pirates was handled with a minimum of drama. It was on the topic of treasure that the problem started. "The treasures in Apes concert belong to the Pumpkin Pirates, we found it first," Rapa Nui said firmly. "It only belongs to you if you're strong enough to protect it," Zoro said menacingly. While he wasn't one for stealing from children, if they were going to declare themselves pirates, then they should understand what that means. "There's no need for that, we'll just charge a small fee for rescuing you," Nami said, smiling sweetly. "How does 99% sound?" "It sounds like robbery." "It only sounds like that because you haven't considered that we have the only ship that can take you out of here. We'd have to put all the treasure in our cargo hold anyway, so it's a lot easier to just leave it there. That's not even mentioning passenger fees and cargo fees, plus the food bill." Shaking his head at Nami's negotiation tactics, Usopp used his hand to shade his eyes despite there being no sun to get into them. "Some of those ships look pretty advanced. Maybe they have some interesting gizmos on them. I think I'll join you in exploring," Robin said next to him, startling him badly because he'd been talking to himself. "I wonder if any of those ships are from the Void Century." A thought occurred to her then. "Chef-san." "Yes, Robin Kwan." Sanji popped up, panting like a dog about to be taken for walkies. "Could you be a deer and dive under the water for me? There may be many more wrecks under the surface." She barely had time to finish the second sentence before the cook was jumping off the side of the ship. That handled, she turned to Luffy. "Captain San, how long does the passage stay open? We wouldn't want to miss it and be stuck here until we starve to death like the crews of all these other ships." "Robin, I have asked you repeatedly to stop being so dark." Usopp protested loudly. "Look at what you did to Chopper." Indeed, the little reindeer had frozen in place with an expression of horrified terror. Robin, of course, ignored him and kept her focus on Luffy. Said Rubber Man adopted an expression of extreme concentration as he tried to remember. "I think it was a few hours." It was obviously a very rough guess. "Then let's get moving," Nami roared, the fires of greed burning in her eyes. "There's treasure to be had." Sanji's head popped up from under the water just then. "Robin Kwan, there's plenty of wrecks down here. Bring back anything that looks advanced," Usopp ordered. Robin, knowing that no books, paintings, or similarly fragile historically valuable artifacts would have survived the ravages of the sea water, supported him. Sanji wouldn't listen to Usopp and technology could tell a lot about history as well. "Do as he says, Cook-san. Will you give me a kiss if I do well, Robin Kwan?" Sanji made kissy faces at her. "Sure," Robin agreed, because he hadn't said where or when, and had such low standards that he would be happy even with a trick. "Zoro, get off your ass and start diving," Nami roared. "There's bound to be treasure down there as well. Go get it yourself, witch." Zoro grunted, pointedly not moving from his spot against the mast. "Oh, I guess you don't care if your debt just piles up. I thought you had honor." Nami sniffed disdainfully. The swordsman glared at her with the murderous rage of a man who knew he was being manipulated but ended up diving for treasure anyway. Chest after chest was hauled onto the Going Merry, filled with jewels, gold, and all sorts of expensive baubles. Devices of unknown provenance were found in much smaller amounts, some rusted beyond all use but others in much better shape. The ship's hull got ever fuller and Nami watched it all with a flushed face and happy eyes. Eventually, the sight of it became too much and she threw herself on the pile of treasure, stretching and contorting like a particularly satisfied cat. She ignored the fact that gold and gemstones were supposed to be hard and uncomfortable. Disturbing giggles and squeals began to escape her mouth, and she panted like a woman who had just run a marathon. "Let's just get out of this place," Usopp suggested with a disturbed expression on his face. Nami looked at him with shocked outrage, unable to believe that he would dare suggest leaving anything behind. "But there's still so many wrecks to check. Nami, the loot is spilling over to the main deck. Let it." "Oi, where's the exit?" Zoro interrupted the escalating argument. In his hands, he held the severed end of the lifeline that had connected to Ruluka Island. "We stayed too long," Henzo realized with a sense of dawning horror. He had thought that the lifeline would keep the passage open, and he had trusted that Luffy knew when it was time to go. He had also gotten distracted talking to his old friends for the first time in 50 years. Ape's concert has trapped us, just like it has trapped so many before. Oh dear, how horrible. Robin's tone was very much at odds with her words. She sounded almost amused. Over the next several days, it became clear that the rainbow mist would not be showing up again anytime soon and that it was, indeed, horrible. Food was running scarce, and the knowledge that time outside Ape's concert passed much more rapidly weighed heavily on them. Many things were attempted to escape. Notable mentions were Nami's attempts to bribe the rainbow mist, Usopp's claims that he once built a time machine and could do so again, and Zoro's training to learn how to cut through dimensions. None of it worked. XXXXX. WHO, are you people, and what are you doing on my ship? The indignant, shocked roar woke them all up from their dispirited slumber. Mary. Usopp squawked back, just as shocked. Usopp. Wait, are we back on Syrup Island? Nami was quick on the uptake. They had all been sleeping on the main deck together. Luffy just stood there with a huge grin on his face as he slowly realized what this meant. We're back, we're together, and you guys remember. XXXXX. Omake. Could have picked a better day for a wedding. Murtaugh, recently joined crew member of the Black Pearl, commented. The rain is a bit of a downer. Mulroy, also a recently joined crew member of the Black Pearl, agreed. It's unnatural is what it is. Pintle grumbled. The rain. Rigetti looked at him owlishly. No, not the bloody rain. Pintle snapped. Pirates sitting next to Navy Marines. What is the world coming to? To be fair, it's not like all these Marines are sitting here quietly because they want to. Murtaugh pointed out, looking at his bruised and battered former comrades. They tried to arrest us. You'd think Commodore Norrington would have warned them when he resigned his commission. Mulroy said. They probably didn't believe him. Rigetti postulated. I wouldn't. A fair point, but he also might have kept mum, because this Lord Beckett fellow is a bit of a twat. Murtaugh theorized. You think he set him up to get pummeled by the captain for delaying the wedding feast? Pintle asked rhetorically, rubbing his chin. I could see it. What is he? Lord Cutler Beckett, duly appointed representative of His Majesty, King George II, asked in a hollow voice. Also a slightly wheezy one, on account of his possibly broken ribs. Hungry. All four of the idiot quartet, as christened by a frustrated Elizabeth Swann, chorused. Hungry. Beckett repeated with such flatness that it might have spawned an entirely new school of philosophy were this ancient Greece. Always hungry. Murtaugh said ominously. I once saw him eat a whole shark, bones and all. Rigetti added. Nobody gets between the captain and his food. Pintle nodded sagely. Mr. Turner and Lady Elizabeth are lucky that he's willing to wait until the proceedings are done. Mulroy elaborated a bit, but as soon as the priest pronounced them husband and wife, he'll be off and eating the entire feast. We had to warn the governor to set out a second feast for everyone else. Murtaugh said conspiratorially. Are you telling me that my men, all my ambitions, were defeated by a glutton? Don't feel bad about it, not even God himself could stop the captain. Pintle commiserated. I'm still not convinced that Captain Luffy really invaded heaven and kicked God's ass as he put it. Murtaugh said dubiously. A man made of lightning sounds pretty godly to me. Rigetti countered. Yes, but why would he have earlobes hanging down to his waist? Why would he want to fly to the moon? Mulroy backed up his friend. Frankly, there is a great deal about the captain's tale that I find very confusing, and not just because it was told in no particular chronological order. Well, if hell can be filled with nothing but pirates, marines, and crossdressers, then why can't God be made of lightning and heaven filled with gold? Pintle argued. Lady Elizabeth seems convinced that Captain Luffy didn't go to hell, merely a prison referred to as hell, but in truth called Impel Down. Murtaugh said. A place with blood-soaked grass that will slice up your feet. Where horrible beasts will hunt you. Where you'll starve until you turn to dust. With pools of boiling blood and freezing pits and eternal darkness where you'll be forgotten by everyone and all the guards are there just to torture you forever. Pintle listed out disbelievingly. And she thinks that's not hell. It does sound pretty horrible. Mulroy admitted. What do you think, Lord Beckett? The foursome turned to their unwilling conversation partner, who had simply been put there after he and his men were beaten to submission and could not move away. I think you should all go there. The bitter man spat. If it really is hell, then we might. Rigetti giggled. And so will you. When you think about it, heaven doesn't sound much better. Murtaugh postulated. I mean, yes, there is a distinct lack of constant torture, which is certainly a plus, but who wants God looming over them every minute of every day, just waiting for an excuse to smite you? Sounds awfully stressful, that. So you're saying that we should give up on religion? Pintle asked, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Captain didn't mention anything about atheists going to hell, despite what the priests say. Mulroy said. But we'd still be pirates. Rigetti pointed out. The captain said he's trying to get home. Murtaugh nodded to himself. We can just ride on his coattails, so to speak, until he does, get rich, and then retire. Then we wouldn't be pirates anymore, we'd be wealthy gentlemen of leisure. This devil captain of yours is leaving. Beckett's voice had turned distinctively conniving. Oh, as soon as his navigator finds him, he said. I see. Shish. Governor Swan shushed angrily, having sidled over to them when he saw them talking. Did nobody ever tell you that it's rude to talk during a wedding ceremony? Oh, have they started already? Rigetti asked back, genuinely surprised. I couldn't hear over the rain. The governor wilted visibly at that. Yes, I suppose the timing could have been better, but Elizabeth insisted on holding it as soon as possible. Hee, the poppet was eager to get popped. Pintle said crudely, elbowing a giggling Rigetti. I say, that is no way to speak of a lady. Murtaugh sputtered indignantly. Don't bother, sir. Governor Swan sighed. I expect nothing else of a pirate. Of course, I expect that my daughter will now be forced to become a pirate as well, seeing as Lord Beckett has an order for her arrest signed by the king. He was obviously not pleased by this, and the way he was staring at the battered leader of the East India Company was a clear solicitation for a negotiation. Well, clear to any politician, which meant that it flew right over the heads of the idiot quartet. Cutler Beckett absolutely did not want to make any deals. He had expected to arrive the conquering hero, arrest Will Turner and Elizabeth Swan on the day of their wedding, along with any other pirates he could get his hands on, use them to lure out Jack Sparrow and this newcomer Monkey D. Luffy, see them all hang so that they couldn't get in the way of his ambitions, and then continue expanding his wealth and power. But it wouldn't be the first time he'd made a deal he didn't like for the sake of his ambitions. I'm sure we can come to agree on something, he said with as much dignity as his battered and bruised face would allow. Miat, the roar made all of them jump in shock, turning to see Luffy launching himself into the building where the feast was waiting. The rubber man had shown enough restraint to wait until the wedding was over, albeit looking wretched and squirming impatiently the whole time, but that restraint only lasted the absolute minimum amount of time. Yes, as I was saying. The rattled priest ran a shaky hand over his head, his voice barely audible above the rain. I now pronounce you husband and wife, you may kiss the bride. That last bit was a bit rushed, Luffy's shout having cut off half of it. Well, at least Elizabeth looks happy. Governor Swan consoled himself, seeing the smile on his daughter's face as she kissed her new husband. Would have looked better if she was less waterlogged, though. Would it really have been so terrible to wait for the rainy season to end? Chapter 18. As a general rule, schemers and planners did not like surprises. Kuro was no exception to this. Indeed, he had a particular dislike of surprises. A random pirate crew appearing on a moored ship, along with a small mountain of treasure, was more than just a surprise. It was something that defied reason, and Kuro had never been to the Grand Line. Fearing for his plans, he tried to bring the situation back to familiar territory. What kind of charade have you concocted this time, Usopp? He asked disdainfully. Did you trick these people into playing along with your lies, or did they take pity on you? His intention had been to sow dissent, but the results were very much not what he had been expecting. Oh, it's you again. Usopp said, none of his usual bluster in his tone. He actually sounded dangerous. Kuro could not believe it, and so he dismissed it. Usopp. Dangerous. Preposterous. That was why he failed to react in time to the explosive projectile fired from a slingshot. XXXXX. Clawhador really was Kuro, Kaya said as they found the fake butler's cat claws, feeling betrayed and heartbroken. I wouldn't lie to you about something like this. Usopp said gently. You shouldn't be lying to a lady at all. Sanji growled, some emotion that he refused to identify flaring within him at the sight of the ship's liar having managed to gain the affection of a woman before him. I like his lies, the young lady said. As it turns out, not all of the stories I told you were lies. The sniper said in amusement. Remember my story about the giant goldfish? We actually ran into one. As well as giants and dinosaurs and all kinds of things. Oh, I would love to hear about your adventures. Kaya beamed, mood improving rapidly. Before we get too carried away, I think we must consider the implications of all of us being here. Robin interjected. Implications? Luffy asked, tilting his head. He was in a visible better mood than normal thanks to having his nakama with him. Yes, implications. Robin repeated. We were not supposed to be here in this point in time. So, did we disappear from wherever we were to appear here? Is there another instance of each of us out in the world? Well, that should be easy enough to check. Nami said, stuttering a bit as she realized what kind of problem this could be. If there's another Usopp here on Syrup Island, then it's the latter. True. Robin nodded. I think it is obvious that our presence here has something to do with the Rainbow Mist and Mary, but that is all we know for certain. It took only a few minutes to confirm that Usopp had suddenly vanished from where he had been playing around with his friends. I wonder what the shitty old man will think of me suddenly disappearing. Sanji pondered while Usopp boasted to his disciples. XXXXX. A little earlier, Zeph stroked his long mustache thoughtfully while all his employees ran around like chickens with their heads cut off. Quickly getting irritated, he swung his peg leg and bowled them all over. Shut up, he snapped. There's no need to panic. But, Owner Zeph, Patty protested. Sanji just vanished into thin air. They might not always see eye to eye, but they were still fellow chefs of the Bharati. So, the elderly former pirate asked. This is obviously some kind of Grand Line nonsense. It may have been a long time since he left that sea, but he still remembered the kind of surprises it could throw at you. If you lost your wits every time it happened, then you never got anywhere. But, we aren't on the Grand Line. So, Zeph shrugged again, refusing to be perturbed. More importantly, start keeping track of how many work hours the shitty eggplant is missing. No sense in paying him if he's not doing his job. XXXXX. So, we have been transported, then. Robin said mostly to herself, deep in thought. In many ways, this is both the most convenient and the most problematic possibility. Robin, you're not making any sense. Luffy whined, completely lost. How can it be both convenient and problematic? He sounded like a confused 5-year-old and Robin gave into the urge to pat him on the head like one. It is convenient because we are all together and in the same situation. But it is problematic because our sudden change in location may draw unsavory attention. Not the rest of the crew, perhaps, but her own disappearance from Crocodile's sight would put the man on guard. Better than there being 2 of us in the world. Nami frowned. I'm not sure if there's enough meat in the world for 2 of Luffy. Said Rubber Man's jaw dropped in horror as he realized that he might have needed to share his meat with himself. For the first time ever, he understood the feelings of his crew when it came to sharing the table with him. 2 of Nami Swan and Robin Kwan, Sanji daydreamed, making kissy faces at the air. What about my swords? Zoro suddenly asked, holding up the Sandai Kidetsu and Yubashiri. Are they still in the store in Logatown or did they get transported as well? My scar is gone, but my swords are here, this makes no sense. Or our clothes, Nami also realized, looking down at what she was wearing. Clothes that had been bought in Alabasta or Logatown. It may be worse than you think. Henzo spoke up ominously. He had been checking on the Mary when the shift happened, because that was where his instruments had been. Being separated from his friends again weighed heavily on him. How so, Henzo-san? Robin asked, always up for hearing how things can get worse. Instead of answering, the scientist waved one of his instruments in their direction, causing it to give off a buzzing, crackling sound. We are all saturated with exotic temporal particles. There is no telling what kind of effect this will have, but the fact that we have been physically moved across the world is a bad sign. I would need to do more tests, perhaps get to my laboratory on Ruluka Island, before I could say more. So the very fabric of space and time might unravel, or we could find ourselves erased from existence. Robin hummed in appreciation of the scientist's pessimism. It is possible, he confirmed, not mentioning that anything was possible until he started ruling things out. Usopp, Nami and Chopper exclaimed fearfully, hugging each other as if that would prevent them from being erased. XXXXX. It was easy enough to convince Kaya to part with the Mary again. The hard part was deciding where to go. We could just go towards the Bharati and then towards the Konami Islands like before, but that would leave Buggy in Orange Town. And what about Kobe? Nami asked. He only got away from Alvida because of you. Luffy frowned, conflicted. He didn't like weaklings and Kobe was kind of weak right now, but he knew that the pink-haired boy had deep reserves of courage. He just needed a little push to find them. They'll say I went back on my word to hold out for a month on that post. Zoro also had a deeply conflicted scowl on his face. While not normally one to care about what anyone thought of him, this was a bit different. He had agreed to hold out on that post for a month, and now he had technically broken his word. Sure, that brat with a butt chin would eventually have broken his and released him from that agreement, but it hadn't happened yet, so it was technically his word that had been broken. And he didn't even know what he should think of his swords. The shopkeeper had technically given them to him as a gift, but now they were in a time before that had happened, and yet the swords were still with him. Did that count as stealing the swords, or were they still a gift? The swordsman could already tell that this time travel nonsense was going to piss him off. XXXXX. The final decision regarding their course of action was a mix of practical and sentimental. Zoro wanted to fight Mihawk again, to see how much he had improved, but the world's greatest would not arrive at the Bharati for quite some time yet and it would be silly to wait for him there. Luffy never really bothered to keep track of time aside from the bare basics, but Nami and Robin kept meticulous track. They were able to narrow down the exact amount of time they had to within the hour. They set sail in the direction of Shell Town, scuttling Alvida's ship and freeing Kobe, then casually smacked down Captain Morgan while dropping him off. After that it was off to Orange Town to boot out Buggy. They made a quick stop to visit Kaya again, since they had extra time, then it was off towards the Bharati. On the way there, Luffy breathed a sigh of relief when no gold-obsessed cat guy showed up. He was not in the mood to be dealing with El Drago. El Drago. Nami echoed when he mentioned it. Yeah, it was part of a dumb mini-adventure about Wunan's treasure. Luffy explained, shaking his head. The Odin was the only good part of that. Odin. There is no Wunan's treasure. Nami snorted. I tried to find it a couple of years ago and there was nothing there except a skeleton in an empty room. Yeah, because he gave back all the gold he stole. Luffy nodded. But how do you know about that, Nami? Why wouldn't I know about that? She barked back, confused. It was a legend about a massive amount of gold in the East Blue. It was practically begging me to find it. If Woonin hadn't been dead already, I would have strangled him for teasing me like that. That's not right, Luffy mumbled, even more confused. Damn right it isn't. Nami fumed at the memory. How could that bastard play with a pure maiden's heart like that? Luffy decided to stop thinking about this for now. The rest of his crew was better at thinking, and now that they were together, he didn't have to force himself to figure things out. XXXXX. Shitty eggplant, Zeph said, unimpressed as his adopted son rolled in with a pirate crew. Secretly pleased, though. Shitty old man, Sanji said back, just as unimpressed. You missed almost a week of work. I quit. Fine, you were a shit cook anyway. Don't insult my chef. Luffy butted in. He's the cook for the future pirate king, so he's obviously the best. Zeph was pleased at the conviction in the young captain's voice, but refused to let it show. He harumphed, eyeballing the crew of young pirates. He noted the refined and rather familiar older woman among them. Now how in the world did this crew of newbies get the infamous Nico Robin to join up with them? What kind of Grand Line nonsense did you get mixed up in? Time travel. Zeph nodded, accepting the explanation immediately. It made as much sense as anything that happened on the Grand Line. How far did you get? Not far, we ran into the rainbow mist just past Alabasta. Sanji explained, then nodded towards his captain. Luffy here has been stuck in a time loop for much longer than the rest of us. We figure it was his fault we got dragged into it. Wouldn't be the first time he's dragged us into trouble. Rainbow mist, huh? Zeph stroked his mustache thoughtfully. I've heard of it. Something about a promised land full of treasure. Yeah, about that, Sanji smirked. We'll be staying as guests for a while. XXXXX. The world's greatest swordsman announced his presence by slicing up Krieg's already battered ship, but kept his gaze on the other pirate crew that was clearly waiting for him. His Kanbushoku haki had told him that the weaklings who had interrupted his nap had been defeated easily by this crew, and he could tell why. Their spirits were much too strong to be tarrying in the East Blue. He also recognized Nico Robin's face among them. Dracul Mihawk, the green-haired man with the 3 swords, called out. All 3 were named Blades, he noted. I challenge you. Mihawk jumped from his coffin raft onto one of the larger pieces of Krieg's ship, standing opposed to the swordsman. You are not ready for this fight, you know this. He said, knowing it to be true. He was not called Hawkeyes merely for the color of his eyes but also for his perception. His Kanbushoku haki was among the greatest in the world, strong enough to see the truth of things. I know. The green-haired swordsman nodded. You may die. Mihawk warned. I know that, too. Not a shred of fear. Despite himself, Mihawk was starting to become interested. He had met many greater swordsmen who had less spirit than this one. Very well, he agreed, and drew his little necklace dagger. That always got rookies riled up. But not this one. The green-haired man almost seemed to have expected it. No, he had expected it. His eyes had flicked towards his cross pendant more than they had to Yuru. How intriguing. Then the battle was on. For an East Blue swordsman, the green-haired man was beyond excellent. He was exceptional even for a Grand Line newbie. He was, however, by no means ready to take on the world's strongest. But he didn't lose his temper. He didn't swing wildly and he didn't overcommit. He didn't rise to the silent taunts and insults Mihawk was giving him. There were even times where Mihawk might have been caught off guard if his opponent was faster and had haki. We have fought before, Mihawk said conversationally. I can you see reacting to some of my moves before I make them. Granted, he was deliberately moving slowly enough for that to be possible, but it was still noteworthy. Yeah, the green-haired man grunted, not elaborating. He continued to attack at a measured pace, ferocious but controlled. And yet I do not remember you. Mihawk continued to speak, paying more attention to his opponent's face and spirit than to his swordplay. What is your name? There was an off chance that he had encountered this man years ago and simply forgotten about him. After all, he did not bother to remember every insect he crushed. Roronoa Zoro. The name rang no bells at all. It was possible that he had crushed some weakling who had been spurred on by that defeat, but it was unlikely. A spirit like this was rare, and not something that could be trained. Mihawk sensed the dormant will of a conqueror within this man, and that was something you had to be born with. That left very few possibilities is the answer to this mystery. I do not know you, yet we have fought before. He spoke, trapping all 3 of Zoro's swords with his dagger. How far back in time did you travel? It was the only reasonable explanation. Zoro grinned like a demon around the hilt in his mouth. Just a few weeks, and this is my first time, but I'll come back again and again. I'll challenge you every time. Even if I can't train my body, I've learned more from this spar than I would from a dozen battles and I can still train my spirit. I'll learn haki before I even get to the Grand Line. Mihawk backed off and raised an eyebrow, putting away his dagger in favor of Yuru. Tell me how that works out for you. With a single slash, the promising young swordsman was slain. XXXXX. Why would you do that, you imbecile? Nami roared, having woken up back on the Mary's deck on Syrup Island. Someone had to test out if all of us would come back from now on, which? Zoro retorted unrepentantly. Zoro, you can't kill yourself just because of a time loop. Chopper scolded, the little reindeer doctor poking at the swordsman to see if there was any sign of the massive wound Mihawk had carved into him. It's fine, we're all here, aren't we? Zoro complained. We are not, actually. Robin piped up. Henzo isn't here. They all looked around to confirm that, and it turned out that the scientist was indeed gone. Although his instruments were still on the ship. Maybe it's because he's not part of our crew. Usopp theorized cautiously. It seems pretty obvious that the time travel thing is tied to the Mary now. Could she not bring him back with us unless he was actually on the ship when it happened? Henzo had been in the Baratie when it happened this time. That's probably the case. Robin agreed. Who are you and what are you doing on my ship? Ah, Mary, the butler, had discovered them again. XXXXX. Omake. Frankie lifted up his sunglasses and squinted at his environs. Where the hell am I? The cyborg demanded of nobody in particular. Tortuga, mate. A drunken man lying in a ditch slurred. Thanks, bro. Frankie said politely to the helpful man. Of course, the answer didn't actually help at all. He had no idea where Tortuga was or how he got here. The only upside was that it was obviously a pirate haven. Mentally shrugging, he walked into the town. No sense in just standing around. His appearance immediately attracted a lot of attention. Even pirates could be baffled by the sight of a huge man with weird proportions and crazy blue hair, among his other notable features. Hey, big boy, did you lose your pants? An amused prostitute called out, to much hooting and cackling from everyone nearby. I'm too SUUUPEER for pants, baby. Frankie made finger guns at the woman, utterly shameless. Having not gotten the embarrassed reaction she'd been aiming for, the prostitute instead put on a sultry smirk. Is that right? Then how would you like to lose the rest of it with me? I appreciate the offer, but I need to find my crew. Frankie went into his signature pose. Have any of you seen a SUUUPEER ship with a sun figurehead? Or a slightly less SUUUPEER caravel with a goat figurehead? The Straw Hat Pirates. Straw Hat, the crowd muttered, some fearfully, some in awe, others in confusion. Straw Hat. Another voice came and a disheveled man approached. You mean Monkey D. Luffy. That's the guy, yow. Frankie exclaimed in excitement. What's your name, bro? James Norrington, and I am not your bro. The man said flatly. Despite his generally unkempt appearance and the aura of a drunkard, he still held himself with a rigidity that reminded Frankie of a Marine. Norrington bro. The cyborg ignored the implied admonishment. Can you take me to Luffy? No. The possibly former Marine refused him flatly. I have no idea where that menace is, but he might come back here if he hears that one of his crewmates is present. If he does, can you please take him back to wherever he came from? That's the idea. Frankie nodded enthusiastically. It sounded like Norrington bro had an encounter with Luffy and got the worst of it. Business as usual. I guess I need to make a bit of a ruckus to get his attention. Those words caused everyone in Tortuga to hold their breath in fear. They still remembered what Luffy had been like, and he hadn't been trying to cause a ruckus. Frankie ignored their reaction and produced a hammer. Alright, who needs some carpentry done? I'm the best shipwright in the world, and I can make your ships the terror of the seas. There was a pause as the pirates processed these words. Then they remembered Luffy's stretching and the stories they'd heard about his adventures. XXXXX. Frankie quickly became a very wealthy man. He didn't really care about money, but he knew how useful it could be. By the time he was reunited with Luffy, he already knew that this wasn't their world and had been working on a way to get back. That's when the money came in. Tortuga rapidly grew into a fortified pirate stronghold, instead of a dingy little port. Luffy and Frankie often sailed out to collect stuff or out of sheer boredom, but many other pirate crews paid for his services by delivering exotic materials. James Norrington, seeing what was happening early on and still holding a sense of duty to the innocent people of the Caribbean despite resigning his commission in the Navy, knew that he needed to step in. Frankie's skills as a shipwright were so ridiculous that they would cause a massive resurgence of piracy if left unchecked. But trying to stop him directly was useless, he had already learned that from his encounters with Luffy. So he sobered up and became the new pirate admiral of Tortuga, allowing him to indirectly control who received Frankie's new ships. There were few pirates in the world that were cunning and intelligent enough to match him, and none of them had been in Tortuga at the time, nor did any of them want to deal with the administrative duties such a position required. The Royal Navy branded him a traitor of course, and put a huge bounty on his head, but he didn't care. The woman he wanted to marry was already lost to him and his reputation as an officer tarnished, so what did it matter what they called him? This development had repercussions. While Norrington did his best to rein in the predations of the pirates nominally under his flag, they were still pirates in the end. Even secretly sending out warnings had limited effect. The new Frankie series of pirate ships had a devastating effect on the suddenly inferior navy. Where pirates might have previously run away, they were now far more often willing to fight. In response, the various kingdoms and empires of Britain had to pour more money into air navies to increase their size and power. More dangerously, however, was what happened when some of the Frankie-built ships were captured intact. The cyborg hadn't made them anything particularly advanced by his standard, but his standard was skewed. The seas became a battlefield as everyone scrambled to grab as much technology as they could get their hands on. Some years after Frankie and Luffy mysteriously disappeared from Tortuga, a massive war erupted as greed and fear got the better of every king in Europe and beyond. Every country with colonies experienced massive rebellions as they tried to overtax them in their eagerness to gain gold to fund their armies and navies. Rebellions that they could do nothing about, because every other country started supporting those rebellions to cripple their enemies. The Americas declared independence early, and with much less fuss. However, the lack of a proper enemy also meant that they were less united. Even centuries later, both North and South America would remain a fractured mess, never growing into the global superpower it could have been. The kingdoms of Europe and Asia, initially fighting only at sea, would eventually drag each other and their neighbors into land wars as well, to devastating results. Technology did advance, thanks to Frankie's leftovers and the pressures of war, but the social consequences were dire. Thus did the First World War start a few centuries early, all because of a couple of careless pirates from another world. Chapter 19. Ah! Nami howled in horror, instantly bringing the entire crew to maximum alertness. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji burst through the door, prepared to fight to the death and beyond against whatever threat assailed their navigator. Only, there was no threat. Nami was just staring at the pile of gold and jewels they'd liberated from Ape's concert with dead eyes. What is it, Nami Swan? Sanji asked in a panic, desperately looking for whatever had upset her. It's horrible, she wailed. We're missing a sapphire. There was a moment of silence, then Zoro snorted in disgust and stomped off. Luffy asked eloquently. I believe that Navigator San has just discovered that treasure won't come back in time with us if it isn't on the ship. Robin quickly put it all together. We paid Zeph for our stay at the Barati with one of the smaller sapphires. Robin, Nami sobbed, looking utterly heartbroken. The treasure, my money. It's going to disappear if we spend it. Isn't that how money is supposed to work? Usopp muttered. I'm afraid so. Robin was amused by the dramatics. It seems that Mary only cares to bring us back in time if we aren't on the ship when it happens. Everything else is left behind. Because we're Nakama. Luffy nodded to himself. It made perfect sense to him. You don't understand. Nami suddenly raged, grabbing the rubber captain by the lapels of his shirt. I was going to rip off the world. We would have paid for things, then gone back in time and gotten the money back. It would have been beautiful. At least we'll get our cargo hold back. Luffy looked at the bright side. We can fill it with meat. Nami, no. Chopper yelled in alarm when she started strangling him. Luffy can't afford any more brain damage. Wait, Usopp shouted, bringing all attention to him. How do you even know that something is missing from that big pile of treasure? She looked at him like he was an idiot. I always know exactly how much money I have. XXXXX. Soon after they sailed into the Barati, they found themselves confronted with Zeph. Shitty eggplant. The old chef rumbled, holding up a familiar sapphire. Care to explain why this appeared at the same time as you vanished? Time travel. Sanji explained in the same tone he used the last time. With a side order of bullshit. Zeph hummed and stroked his mustache. Then I'll take this as compensation for suddenly leaving us shorthanded. And as pay for our meals until we leave, right? Nami asked sweetly. No. The retired pirate responded flatly. Pay up if you want to eat. We already paid you in the last loop and it carried over to this one. The navigator roared at him, sprouting shark teeth. Don't be greedy. This garnered extreme deadpan from everyone. Zeph was not impressed. If you don't like it, then you're free to go somewhere else. Nami steamed like a boiling kettle. She turned to the rest of the crew with a borderline deranged look in her eye. I am not going to let that shitty old man whittle away at our treasure bit by bit with every loop, you understand me? I understand, Nami Swan. Sanji ballerina'd over to her. Don't worry, I won't let the shitty old man do that. Good. XXXXX. Just as before, Krieg arrived after several days of the Straw Hats goofing off at the Barati, and was subsequently stomped with ease. Some 10 minutes later, Mihawk floated in serenely on his coffin boat. Zoro was even more prepared for him this time. The memories of their duel were fresher and he had gone into it with a clearer head and more experience fighting stronger opponents. You have gone back in time. Mihawk declared with absolute certainty, this time even faster than before. Zoro knew that he was still fairly new to the Grand Line, not fully accustomed to its particular brand of common sense, but he was still impressed at how quickly Mihawk saw to the truth of the matter. The duel stopped and Zoro grinned, knowing that his death was near. That's right, more than once. Mihawk immediately guessed, his countenance darkening with disapproval. Little frog at the bottom of the well, you will never escape if you keep jumping at the top while ignoring all the stones in between. Zoro's grin dimmed a bit, understanding what the older swordsman was saying. Mihawk was too strong for him, and had no intention of being used as a teacher without his knowledge. He had gotten overly excited at the opportunity to continually challenge the world's greatest to death matches without consequences. I understand. he said. I hope so, it would be a waste of your potential otherwise. Mihawk drew his black blade and took off his head faster than he could react. Zoro's last thought was that he hadn't asked for his name this time. That stung a lot more than he cared to admit. XXXXX. Zoro. Luffy roared in outrage. Stop getting yourself killed. I want to make it to the Grand Line at least. Sorry, Captain. Won't happen again. Zoro grunted, rubbing a hand across his neck. Decapitation was a strange way to die. Nami Swan. Sanji shouted, skipping over to the navigator and holding out his hands. I have your gems. They came back with me when I brought them to the ship. Nami greedily swiped the 2 small gemstones. Good boy. Zoro snorted. Fitting that the cook be treated like a bitch in heat, he acted enough like one. XXXXX. Since Zoro actually cared about surviving this time, he found himself in a peculiar pickle. It felt wrong to have Mihawk right there and say nothing, but he also couldn't just challenge the man. Mihawk, Zoro shouted after the elder swordsman was done carving up Krieg's ship. He ignored his crew yelling at him. Mihawk didn't react beyond shifting his sharp yellow eyes to him, waiting. The Zoro that had never fought him before and didn't understand how vast the world was would have taken that as an insult. Now, he knew that he was only getting as much attention as he had earned. Drawing Wado Ikimonji and pointing it at the world's greatest, he made his declaration. One day, I will challenge you for the title of the world's strongest swordsman. Do you hear me, Mihawk? Mihawk's eyes sharpened minutely as he stared back in the pregnant silence that followed. Zoro had no doubt that the elder swordsman was seeing quite a bit behind those words, and did his best to project forward his will and spirit. I hear you, swordsman. Mihawk acknowledged, drawing gasps from those who understood what that meant. What is your name? Roronoa Zoro. I will await you at the top. Mihawk said simply, got back on his coffin boat and sailed away. XXXXX. After the excitement at the Baratie, it was time to go to the Konami Islands and deal with Arlong. Nami could hardly wait. The first time, for her, had been a mass of anxiety, stress, fear, hate, grief, and more. Now she knew just how much of a chump Arlong was and couldn't wait to see him absolutely destroyed. Physically and mentally. The only way this could be made better is if she was strong enough to do it herself, but she knew that she wasn't there yet. Maybe, if these stupid time loops went on long enough, Usopp would be able to put together a superior version of the Kleem attack that she could use to fry the fish herself. They did still have a bunch of mysterious advanced technology in the Mary's cargo hold after all. Luffy had mentioned something about the shipwright that would be joining them, Frankie, being super good with technology. Between him and Usopp, surely they would figure out a way to give her Kleem attack more oomph. Until then, she would content herself with watching her crew do most of the heavy lifting. She'd take on a few of the small fry, just to test out how the Kleem attack worked against fishmen. Just like Zoro's swords, it had come back with her. The Going Merry sailed in, bold as brass, paying no heed to any of Arlong's underlings that might be watching. Nami greeted the people cheerfully, this time knowing that their coldness was fake and that they were only doing it in case she wanted to run instead of trying to save them. Nami, who are these people? Genzo asked warily, looking at the eclectic collection of weirdos that was the Straw Hat Pirates. It's my pirate crew, I'm their navigator. Nami explained happily. We're going to kick Arlong's ass. Luffy declared, still hyped from having all of his crew in the loops with him. You really think they can do it? Nojiko asked skeptically. She knew better than most how strong Arlong was. Easily. Nami replied confidently, going over to give her sister a hug. It may not have been all that long since they'd last seen each other, but she had set out expecting to be gone for years. Don't worry, my beautiful Nojiko. Sanji interjected, blazing with lust-fueled chivalry. I'll turn all those fishmen into sushi for you. Is he for real? Nojiko asked, nonplussed. Unfortunately. Zoro snorted. You wanna go, you national treasure. Sanji roared, instantly offended. Can you stop slobbering over the women long enough to get cut up? The swordsman shot back sarcastically. Nojiko looked even more skeptical now. Don't worry, that's just how Swordsman-san and Cook-san show affection for each other, UFUFUFUFU. Robin chuckled. Ah, I see. They're like that. Nojiko nodded in understanding. We are not. Zoro and Sanji shouted, both horrified at the thought, if not for entirely the same reasons. Oh, my apologies, I didn't mean to imply anything. Robin said innocently. Woman, Zoro growled, knowing that to be a lie. Don't be rude to Robin Kwan, Marino. Sanji shouted at him. She apologized even when she didn't have to. Be grateful. You're hopeless. Zoro shouted back, clenching his swords with a desperate desire to cut the cook up for his stupidity. No, you're hopeless. Sanji retorted, feet trembling with a desperate desire to kick some respect for women into the swordsman. Hey, can we have ham melons after we kick Arlong's ass? Luffy asked. Those were pretty good. Usopp agreed. What's a ham melon? Chopper asked innocently. Everyone gasped in shock. The raccoon speaks. Genzo sputtered. I'm a reindeer. Chopper roared, going into his heavy point. Wow, you really found some characters, Nojiko muttered in amazement. XXXXX. Arlong had heard some rumors about his subject stockpiling guns, so he decided to check it out by himself. Imagine his surprise when he saw a pirate ship docked at the village. When he saw Nami among them, his first thought was that she had duped another crew with her schemes, but this time brought them all the way to him instead of leaving them stranded somewhere. "What is this you brought me, Nami?" he asked, grinning widely. "Does this crew have a high bounty? Is their cargo hold full of treasure? Perhaps enough to complete their deal even. If that was the case, then Arlong would honor his word and free these humans of their obligation to him. But if one of his subordinates demanded tribute from them in the future, well, that had nothing to do with him, now did it? The cargo hold is full of treasure, but it's all mine. You won't see even a scrap of it," Nami said back with a confidence that took him aback. Anger, even well-hidden anger, he was familiar with. This self-assurance he was not, and he didn't like it. "And why is that?" he asked menacingly. "They docked on my island, so their ship is mine. Because they're going to beat the shit out of you and destroy everything you've built here." She shot back, snapping a peculiar blue metal staff into place. "Oh, Nami, I thought you had learned better by now." Arlong chided as his crew laughed at her. Snidely, he continued, "No human can ever beat a fishman." The villagers cowered away as they should, but Nami and this pirate crew of hers were not looking at all intimidated, to his irritation. Where did these humans get off looking so confident when faced with superior fishmen? Hachi, the dumb-looking one in the straw hat, suddenly spoke up. "You know that Jinbei wouldn't like what you're doing here." Arlong twitched at the mention of his old captain, but Hachi straight up recoiled. Hachi flailed his arms. "How do you know Jinbei-san?" "I met him once, he's a good guy." Straw Hat said. "He would be ashamed of what you've become." "Don't listen to him, Hachi, he's just some human." Arlong roared angrily. As much as he respected Jinbei for his strength, the big whale shark fishman just didn't understand that there could be no peaceful coexistence with humans. They were all evil, inferior creatures. But, he said he met Jinbei-san." Hachi stammered, looking between them in distress. The octopus fishman had never been very bright. He needed proper guidance to understand the truth of the world, Arlong's guidance. He still believed that their parting with Jinbei had been amicable. "Kill these humans, except Nami." He grinned at her menacingly. "I'll have to explain the facts of life to her again. XXXXX. But it was Arlong who had the facts of life explained to him, and quite painfully at that. The rank and file members of his crew got swept aside like they were nothing. Robin crushed most of them with negligent ease in an instant. Chu got double-teamed by Usopp and Nami, the former of which had already fought him solo in the previous timeline. With their combined bag of tricks, they were able to handle him quite easily. Karubi was no match at all for Sanji. Hachi even less so for an uninjured and significantly more skilled Zoro. Plus, his head wasn't even in the game, too rattled by what Luffy had said to him. Chop didn't even have to fight. Arlong watched all this happen, certain that Fishman's superiority would win the day. With every loss, his eyes got more wild even as the stupid superior grin on his face remained frozen. Luffy also stayed in place, staring into his eyes unblinkingly. Eventually, Arlong couldn't take it anymore and launched himself forward with a roar. Luffy had fought the fishman so many times by now that he could win in his sleep. His haki had also been increasing, even if he still wasn't able to bring it out consciously. It increased the force behind his blows even though his body was no stronger than the first time. Arlong was defeated and broken in a mere handful of moves. The villagers saw it all happen and couldn't believe it for a long moment. "We're free," someone asked disbelievingly. "The fishmen are done for." "We're free," another echoed, and things escalated from there. Several industrious villagers started breaking out the torches, intent on burning Arlong Park to the ground. Nami joined up with those, then she was going to get her tattoo changed again. Having it revert back to Arlong's mark had been pissing her off tremendously. Other, less kindly inclined villagers, approached the downed fishmen with a variety of improvised weaponry. Now that the shoe was on the other foot, they were intent on extracting some payback. Chopper wouldn't let them beat on or kill the defeated injured, alas, so all they could do was make their bindings painfully tight. Luffy kept his focus on the most important thing. Bring on the ham melons. XXXXX. Lieutenant Commander Branu massaged his temples after getting off the Den Den Mushi with Captain Nezumi. The man was both incredibly annoying and the report he had given was troublesome. Straw Hat Luffy, apparently a hotshot new rookie from the East Blue. There had been a few reports of him before. Fairly minor stuff, such as getting into a fight with Captain Morgan, which led to the reveal of that officer's corruption, and the defeat of Krieg. There had also been some mention of an interaction with Mihawk, but it was unclear. It was this most recent report about the defeat of Sano's Arlong that was the most troubling. Not only should that fishman have been much stronger than the average East Blue pirate, yet had apparently been defeated easily, but the reveal of a surprise crew member of the Straw Hat Pirates. Devil's Child Nico Robin, bounty, 79 million. A woman who the Marines had been trying to catch for 20 years now. What was she doing in the East Blue? Why put herself under the command of a rookie captain? It made no sense, which is why Branu was getting the feeling that he was missing something. Nico Robin was a dangerous schemer intent on disrupting the balance of the world and bringing down the world government. Wait, Monkey D. Luffy. Branu knew of two other people with the name of Monkey and the mysterious D initial. Monkey D. Garp was the hero of the Marines, but his son, Monkey D. Dragon, was the exact opposite, the leader of the Revolutionary Army and the most wanted man in the world. Such a man would very much want a woman like Nico Robin in his ranks. The Marines knew that the revolutionaries had been searching for her as well, in fact. Could it be? He would have to go talk to Sengoku about this. This could be the most important bounty he had ever assigned, too important to risk getting it wrong. XXXXX. EHHHHH. The shocked outcry shattered the calm of the seas. What the hell is with this bounty? Nami demanded. Straw Hat, Monkey D. Luffy, son of Dragon the Revolutionary. Wanted dead or alive. 120 million. Whoa, that's a huge starting bounty. Luffy got excited for a moment, before remembering why that was a bad thing. Crap, this means that Blackbeard will show up too early again. You didn't tell us that your father was such an outrageous man. Usopp panicked for no reason. Oh yeah, I guess it has been a while since we talked about that. Luffy started picking his nose in boredom, having had this conversation far too many times already. Yeah, my dad is Dragon, but I don't really know him. My gramps is Garp, the hero of the Marines. My brother is Fire Fist Ace, Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander. And I know red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors. Yufufufu, Captain Sand sure is well connected. Robin chuckled. If the Marines figured all that out, then the bounty makes sense. I think that's probably because of my presence, so I suppose I should apologize. You should never apologize for being here, Robin Kwan. Sanji immediately protested. Why would this be because of you, Robin? Chopper asked innocently. My bounty is much too big for the East Blue, and the Revolutionary Army has been after me as well. Robin explained. Simply having the same last name as Garp or Dragon would not draw too much attention, or perhaps Garp was even covering for Luffy, but me seemingly appearing out of nowhere to join a rookie in the East Blue would be far too suspicious for them to brush aside. The Marines have probably assumed that Luffy is an agent of his father. If not for him being a complete unknown until now, the bounty would probably be far higher. That's so annoying. Luffy gnashed his teeth, balled up the paper and threw it into the sea. It's my adventure, not my dad's. There's no use talking about it, it is what it is. Zoro said calmly. We'll just have to face it head on. Luffy really wanted to agree, but he had encountered several situations during this time loop business that couldn't be tackled head on. XXXXX. The first sign they had that something was wrong, was the smoke rising into the air from Logatown. Which, granted, was a pretty big sign. It looks like there was a major battle or something. Usopp said, looking towards the town through his telescope. That's strange, who would attack Logatown and the shitty smoke marine? Sanji asked. It was a very good question, because there really wasn't anyone in the East Blue who could handle a Logia-like smoker. And nobody outside of the East Blue would have any reason to attack it. There's a bunch of wrecked ships. Usopp continued to describe. Their flag is a sad bear over crossbones, surrounded by playing card symbols. Luffy knew that flag, so did Nami and Zoro. The Trump Pirates. They all exclaimed, some more confused than others. Who are the Trump Pirates? Chopper asked, having no idea about some East Blue pirates. A bunch of fakes. Luffy replied. Their leader is some bear guy that thinks he can become Pirate King by making the Coulcn't scientists build him a big cannon instead of sailing. A big cannon, you say? Usopp said flatly, woodenly turning to stare at what appeared to be a pretty blasted out Logatown. Everyone except Chopper followed his line of sight, likewise realizing what had likely happened. The poor reindeer was just confused, having not connected the dots. Yep, it would be pretty cool if it wasn't so dumb. Luffy nodded, also not connecting the dots. Damn it, how are we supposed to get any supplies if the town was blown up and the Marines are all riled up? Nami bemoaned. We should dock anyway. Zoro grunted. We can handle Smoker and I have something I need to do there. He had to go talk to the shopkeeper and tell him what had happened to Yubashiri and Sandai Kidetsu, and offer compensation if necessary. He wasn't some thief, not even accidentally. Don't assume that everything will go as we expect. Robin warned. Luffy's bounty is much higher this time, and the Marines know what I am part of the crew. That news could be what precipitated the Trump pirates attacking Logatown to begin with, and there may be other differences. Robin knew better than most how small things could snowball into big things, how little bits of information could have dramatic consequences. She was familiar with the Trump pirates, them having been potential Baroque Works recruits before being deemed as unsuitable. She knew the arrogant mentality of pirate captains that dreamed of being Pirate King, Luffy being a notable exception. With this kind of attack having never happened before, she could only assume that something to do with them had provoked the Trump pirates into attacking Logatown. Let's go see what's up. Luffy decided. He was both curious and knew that they would need to stock up on meat for the journey to Reverse Mountain. XXXXX. The Marines and the world government weren't the only ones pondering the implications of Nico Robin joining a completely unknown pirate crew. One Monkey D. Dragon was also confused by it. It would have been one thing if she had joined up with his son after running into him by chance and after he had already gained some notoriety. But for such a notorious woman to come all the way to the East Blue to join up with a no-name, no-bounty pirate. That was a different matter entirely. Since Dragon had already intended to be here to see his son off on what he considered the true start of his adventure, he decided to observe as well. And maybe interfere if Smoker and the reinforcements he had received proved too much for Luffy. It would be terribly rude of the world government to get in the way of a man's journey. That was why he had been present when the Trump pirates had unleashed their new weapon on Logatown. As good as his Kanbushoku haki was, it didn't make him all-knowing or truly precognitive. By the time he realized what was going on, it was already too late. And after that, the angry swarm of Marines had quickly taken the overly cocky crew apart. So he was still hidden from all eyes when the Straw Hats sailed into Logatown. The Marines, already angry at the unprovoked attack and having been mobilized specifically to intercept this crew, fell upon them like locusts. Dragon had prepared himself to intervene, only to blink in surprise when his son and his crew made short work of the force standing in their way. He had thought that the vastly inflated bounty was simply because of Nico Robin's presence and the Marines' misplaced belief that Luffy was an agent of the Revolutionary Army, but it appeared that he was also much too strong for the East Blue. Captain Smoker, Captain Black Cage, Hina, and multiple CP9 agents were battled and defeated in a pitched battle in the Logatown Plaza. No rookie crew only a few weeks into their voyage should have been capable of facing off against such a force. Dragon had thought that Sengoku had committed an excessive amount of resources. But Luffy demonstrated excellent combat prowess, considerable mastery of his devil fruit, knowledge of several Rokushiki techniques, and was even on the verge of manifesting haki. His crew was not quite as advanced, but they were better than they should be. All of them showed the hallmarks of Grand Line experience. Still not good enough to face off against CP9 with ease, but they didn't suffer overwhelming defeat either. And Luffy was able to finish the fights when they went bad. Dragon was very intrigued. With the Marines and CP9 suffering a humiliating defeat and being left to recover where they fell, the Straw Hats had free reign of the city. Free reign which they used to buy up supplies with jewels and raw gold. Luffy took the opportunity to climb up the execution platform and proclaim his intention to become Pirate King. Dragon could only grin at that. It was a worthy goal, one that would shake up the world. He decided that it was time to step in and ask some questions. At this point, there was little use in hiding, as this event would already catapult the Straw Hat Pirates into the realm of the truly notorious. Pirate King, he spoke as he appeared next to his son. I approve. I don't care what you approve of. Luffy instantly retorted, showing not a hint of surprise. In fact, it seemed almost as if Luffy was expecting him. That was very interesting. This is my adventure, not yours, no matter what the Marines think. Dragon's grin only widened at that, sensing the flickers of Haoshoku haki in the words. His son had grown up into an impressive man. Of course, we all must walk our own path, and the world is still waiting for our answer. Right, Luffy nodded firmly. It was nice seeing you, Dad, but I gotta get back to my crew. Dragon just nodded and vanished again, not asking how Luffy knew who he was or to join the revolution or send Nico Robin to them. A conqueror blazed his own way forward and did not listen to the reason of others. Besides, whether Nico Robin exposed the truth of the world with the revolutionaries or with Luffy mattered little in the end. XXXXX. Straw Hat, Monkey D. Luffy, son of Monkey D. Dragon. Blackbeard read to himself. Wanted for ties to the Revolutionary Army, piracy, stealing marine secrets, and the devastating raid against Logatown. Bounty, 250 million. What an outrageous rookie, ziahahaha. Of course, Blackbeard didn't believe the part about this rookie wrecking Logatown for a second. He had decades of experience with the world government's bullshit and at this point saw through it automatically. Judging by how quickly Straw Hat's bounty had been raised again, the Marines had probably wrecked Logatown themselves in their attempts to apprehend him and Nico Robin, and were just passing the blame around. Now what to do with this information? Unlike what many people believed about him, Blackbeard was not really one for complex long-term plans. He had general ideas about what he wanted and a keen eye for opportunities. He could be incredibly patient if it was necessary, but was not afraid of pouncing on things and then dealing with the consequences. Right now, his goal was to get stronger. He had the Yami Yami no Mi, which had been the linchpin to his ambitions. It was unfortunate that he had needed to kill Thatch and abandon the Whitebeard pirates to get it, but that was how things had turned out. Instead of suddenly rising up to become Whitebeard's successor after gaining the fruit, he would simply have to do things the hard way. To do that, he needed strength, both personal and in his crew. Ace probably wouldn't accept his invitation to join his crew, but what about his little brother? Because Teach recognized Monkey D. Luffy is the younger brother that Ace had constantly bragged about. This smelled like an opportunity. And even if it failed, he would be able to use them to bargain with the world government. Whitebeard's 2nd Division commander and the son of Gal D. Roger Blackbeard had sniffed that secret out long ago, the son of the revolutionary dragon, and Nico Robin. Yes, the world government would give a great deal to get their hands on these people. And it would provoke Whitebeard into a war for certain. What Dragon would do was anyone's guess, but there was a strong chance that he wouldn't leave his son to die, no matter how bad of an idea it would be to attack Marineford. Best of all, no matter how such a battle went, all three sides would be devastated. Ziahahaha. Blackbeard laughed as he made his decision. XXXXX. The Straw Hats knew something was wrong shortly after they sailed down Reverse Mountain. There was no Vivi or Mr. Nine anywhere. They made friends with Laboon and talked to Crocus, who also hadn't seen them. They made it to Whiskey Peak, where the fake bounty hunters were too terrified to get up to their usual antics. There was also no sign of Agaram or Vivi. I was afraid of this. Robin said with a frown. As Miss All Sunday, I let Vivi follow me and discover Mr. Zero's identity. If she tried to follow someone else and got caught, they killed her. Usopp, Nami and Chopper squawked. They better not have laid a hand on even a single one of Vivi Chan's beautiful blue hairs. Sanji roared in outrage. It is possible, Robin said. Anyone discovering Crocodile's identity was usually executed on the spot. But if he knew who she was, then she may have been taken prisoner instead. She's alive, Luffy decided. Vivi was part of the crew, even if she had decided that she had to stay home. If she was dead then they would have reset, he knew it. That still leaves us with quite a problem. Robin accepted his words calmly. If Crocodile has Vivi prisoner, he would be able to blackmail the king into nearly anything. And if he realizes her importance to us, then he will not hesitate to use her against us as well. Blackbeard might show up, too. Luffy scowled. That's why I had to, keep my head down. He always shows up if my bounty get too high, and this is the highest it's ever been. The sheer disgust with which he spoke of keeping his head down would have been funny if not for what he said. Then we will have to be very careful. Robin said simply. Our main advantage is that no one knows our route. Are we still going to stop on Drum Island? Chopper asked hesitantly. I want to talk to Doctorine, and beat back Wapple so that he doesn't come back. Of course. Luffy nodded firmly. He wasn't going to skip out on something that important to one of his crew. I'll leave the sneaky stuff to you, Robin. Just tell me who's ass to kick. XXXXX. Elsewhere on the Grand Line. In a spot where Ruluka Island should have been, there was only empty ocean. And a mysterious diving crew mysteriously dredging up something mysterious from the waters. XXXXX. Their detour to Drum Island turned out to be unexpectedly dangerous. Dr. Kurha had been rampaging around the place, looking for her missing apprentice, then grown despondent when she found no sign of him. So when the Straw Hats sailed in and she heard that Chopper was on board the Going Merry, things got a little excitable. Because Kurha was a Tsunere, a most deadly beast. She was tremendously relieved when Chopper came back, and her rage was equally massive. Wapple had the misfortune of arriving at about that time and served as an example of why it was unwise to cross a doctor. Kurha barely even listened to their explanation about time travel. As soon as she heard that Chopper was staying with the Straw Hats, she picked up an old naginata and attempted to perform unnecessary surgery on them with it. XXXXX. Unfortunately, their adventure in Alabasta didn't go nearly as well. Being forewarned about the threat of Blackbeard, the Straw Hats' plan had been a much stealthier than normal entry into the country. Having no information on Vivi's whereabouts, they guessed that she would be held at Rainbase. That was where Crocodile was headquartered, after all. But it never really got that far. Having gotten a taste of the strength of Luffy and his crew, as well as his brief interaction with Dragon, the Marines were desperate to stop this rising new threat. They sent 2 vice admirals, backed up by a considerable number of subordinates as backup. Blackbeard, pursuing his own ambitions, also ended up in Alabasta. Ace had already been there for a while, waiting for Luffy to meet him. Crocodile had been there to begin with, and was getting awfully nervous about all these powerful people showing up. Then there was the volatile civil war situation. In short, it was inevitable that something would light the fuse. Nobody could say for sure who started it, but the brawl that engulfed Nanohana left the entire town devastated. Crocodile's people had stayed out of it, aside from throwing blame around and further inflaming the civil war. The Straw Hats hadn't wanted to get involved, but the giant plumes of fire and darkness forced their hand. It didn't end well. XXXXX. What a bunch of monsters. Zoro muttered as they found themselves once more back on the Going Merry on Syrup Island. He had been killed by Vice Admiral Momonga, being no match for the Marine swordsman yet. We need to get stronger. And we need to be more discreet. Robin didn't quite disagree. Our captain has some troublesome connections for the world government to panic about. The archaeologist was honestly a little baffled that Luffy's connections weren't known previously. It had taken just one loose thread for them to begin unraveling it all. Garp must have been covering for his grandson. XXXXX. Omake. For being a captain, Luffy didn't really do much on the ship most of the time. He was, however, perpetually hungry, so he fished. Usually he didn't catch anything, being too impatient for it. This time, he caught quite a prize indeed. Ooh, it's a devil fruit, he exclaimed, recognizing the unnaturally large and strangely colored fruit, with its swirly patterns. He wasn't quiet, so a good chunk of the crew heard him. A devil fruit, you say? Jack Sparrow, still waiting to get his ship back, immediately ambulated over. Like the one you ate that made you stretchy. Jack was very interested in that kind of power. Not like mine, Luffy corrected, turning the fruit over. It was somewhat lemon-shaped and a bright green color. The gum-gum fruit won't appear again until I die. This one has a different power. What kind? Pintle leaned in close, grinning as he stared at the fruit greedily. Don't know. Luffy shrugged. You gonna eat this one, too, Captain? Rigetti asked. It made sense to him that the captain would want to keep the power to himself. You can't eat 2 devil fruits. Luffy looked at him as if he was dumb, which was honestly kind of insulting. Everyone knows that you explode if you try. Could one of us eat it, then? Jack asked casually. There was nothing casual about the look in his eye. Sure. Luffy handed him the fruit like it was nothing. It tastes horrible, though. And the sea will hate you forever. If you go overboard, you'll sink like a rock. I almost drowned so many times, she. Upon saying that, Luffy wandered off, sensing that nobody was paying attention to the ship's pantry. He was hungry. Jack held the fruit in his hands, staring at it with a complex expression. Then he sighed and lobbed it towards Pintle and Rigetti, walking away without saying a word. As interested as he was in the powers granted by the fruit, he could not stomach the thought of being hated by the sea. She was the only mistress he truly loved. A wooden block was found and the devil fruit placed atop it. They stared at it like it was the One Ring at the Council of Elrond. Sitting on barrels around the devil fruit were Pintle, Rigetti, Murtaugh and Mulroy, each sporting deeply thoughtful frowns. Circled around them was the rest of the crew. So, should we eat it? And if yes, who should do the honors? Pintle opened up the debate. If we are trying to stay out of hell, then eating something called a devil fruit seems like a bad idea. Murtaugh pointed out. Aye, that's true. Mulroy nodded along with his compatriot. Weren't there many a cautionary tale about people damning their souls for power? Didn't humanity get kicked out of the Garden of Eden because Eve got tempted into eating a fruit by the devil? You're saying we'll turn into a woman if we eat this here devil fruit? Rigetti asked vapidly. No, ya idiot. Pintle yelled in exasperation, dope-slapping his nephew. That's not what devil fruits do. You don't know that. Rigetti yelled back in offense. Oi, Captain, can a devil fruit turn you into a woman? Yes. Luffy's voice came back, sounding like it was yelled through a mouthful of food. See, Rigetti smuggled triumphantly. That just makes it even more dangerous to eat it. Murtaugh said, vaguely horrified. That's true. Pintle admitted, ignoring Rigetti's smugness. I wouldn't want to get violated by demons. What makes you think demons wouldn't violate you even as a man? Mulroy asked, confused. I mean, they're demons. Why would they be put off by a little buggery? Captain said hell is full of crossdressers and perverts, remember? Pintle argued. They might enjoy that, so I figure demons would only violate women. Maybe they'd make everyone else watch. The group of expert philosophers paused to consider that argument, then nodded with an indistinct mutter of agreement. So we are agreed that it's a bad idea to eat this devil fruit, then? Murtaugh asked. We don't know if this fruit will turn whoever eats it into a woman. Mulroy pointed out. And if we're already bound for hell, then what difference does it make? But we don't know what the fruit does. Murtaugh argued back. We could just ask the captain. Rigetti pointed out with shocking logic. Oi, Captain, do you know what this fruit does? No. Will it turn us into women? No, Eva-chan has that one. Who the hell's is Eva-chan? Pintle questioned in confusion. That isn't important. Murtaugh decreed. What is important is that this fruit can't turn us into women. Aye, fair enough. That brings us right back to square one, doesn't it? Mulroy asked rhetorically. Do we accept that we are already damned and eat the fruit, or do we reject it and hope we can stay out of hell? For my part, I will say that this feels either like a trap or a test for our immortal souls. Maybe we could sell it to the Navy. Rigetti snickered. They'd be paying us for the privilege of going to hell when they die. Aye, and in the meanwhile they'd be monsters like the captain. Pintle said flatly. Oh yeah, and so the debate ran in circles, ultimately deciding nothing. What none of them thought to consider was that if one devil fruit appeared, could there be others? And these others didn't even have Luffy's patchwork explanations for them. Before long, pirates, marines, and seamen of all stripes with strange powers started popping up. This completely wrecked the attempts of Britain's Royal Navy to stamp out piracy. Then it proceeded to wreck any notion of stability as people with effectively supernatural powers realized that they were better off on the mainland and far away from the sea. Within a few decades, every major political entity on the planet was reduced to ruin, replaced by devil fruit-empowered warlords. Chapter 20. The last loop had revealed a host of potential problems for the Straw Hats. Most immediate among them was Robin's disappearance from Baroque Works and Vivi's situation. Although it wasn't strange for Miss All Sunday to go freelancing, the issue was that Robin simply didn't know where exactly she had been at the time of her sudden translocation. It could have been anything from right in front of Crocodile's nose to somewhere completely isolated while on a task. Even a person as meticulous as Robin didn't keep careful note of her exact location at any given time, on the off chance that it would be relevant. All she had was a rough guess of where she had been. To ameliorate this lack of information, Robin helped herself to the Den Den Mushi of the Shell's Town Marine base after the crew beat the stuffing out of Captain Morgan. It wasn't exactly safe for a pirate to be using a marine Den Den Mushi. Not because it was illegal, though it was, but because you never knew who was eavesdropping. Mr. Zero, she greeted after calling Crocodile. Miss All Sunday, he said back, audibly puffing on his cigar. You caused quite a stir when you disappeared right in front of Mr. Two's eyes. Care to explain? Oh, so that's what she had been doing. Robin did remember giving some orders to the shapeshifting Okama around this time. I'm afraid I can't do that, because I don't know what happened. One moment I was there and the next I was elsewhere. Unlike Luffy, Robin could lie like a champion. And even with the time loops resetting everything, she had learned the hard way to always play things close to the chest. I'll try to make it back as soon as I figure out where exactly I am. This line isn't secure, so I have to go now. Goodbye. She hung up before he could say anything more. It seems we were somewhat fortunate, she said to the crew. How? Chopper asked, not understanding. Luffy was right there with him. Had I disappeared with no witnesses, Crocodile would have suspected treachery. Now he will be wondering what kind of Grand Line nonsense I had gotten caught up in. This call will have somewhat damaged that, unfortunately, but it will serve us well in future loops should we fail this one. She explained. You're so smart, Robin Kwan. Sanji gushed. She ignored him and turned her attention back to the Den Den Mushi. Now I just need to see if I can convince Miss Wednesday to not do anything foolish. Calling the undercover princess was a little more difficult because she and Mr. 9 didn't have a personal Den Den Mushi, but Mr. 8 did in his capacity as the mayor of Whiskey Peak. Ma, who is this? The man asked as he picked up the call. This is Miss All Sunday. Robin identified herself and quirked an amused eyebrow as the Den Den Mushi stiffened in response to Agaram's reaction. Please put Miss Wednesday on the line. Of course, Agaram said, doing a fairly good job of hiding his concern. Please hold a moment. Robin hummed lightly to herself as she waited. A minute or so later, the telepathic snail suddenly sprouted blue hair and a distinctly feminine appearance. Miss All Sunday, this is Miss Wednesday. What can I do for Baroque works? The hidden princess asked professionally. I need you to stay on Whiskey Peak until I get there. Keep your head down and do not go anywhere at all. Robin instructed. We will be going on a secret mission together, so it is of vital importance that you stay where you are. Do you understand? Robin would never get a reply, because Luffy chose that moment to insert himself into the conversation. Vivi, he hollered. Just stay there until we arrive, then we'll go kick the Sand Croc's ass. Vivi-chan. Sanji groaned in a disturbing fashion and noodled around. I can't wait to see you again, my beautiful desert princess. The call disconnected and Robin turned towards the captain and chef with the gaze of silent judgment. You morons, Nami roared, slamming her fist into both of their heads with full force. What part of, let Robin handle this did you not understand? All you've done is scare Vivi. But I just wanted to let her know that we'll be there soon. Luffy pouted, holding his head. He was wondering if Nami was accidentally channeling Haki when she pummeled him, because those hits shouldn't hurt so much. Sanji didn't even try to defend himself. He had gotten carried away, plain and simple. Well, I suppose we will at least see what will happen now. Robin said. That's strangely optimistic of you. Usopp pointed out. The archaeologist gave him a twisted smile. Was it really? There is no telling what Vivi will do if she thinks that she is being targeted for elimination. And Luffy revealed Mr. Zero's identity over an unsecured line. She might get captured and tortured for information. And there it is. XXXXX. Elsewhere in the world, some people were very confused. One such example was the owner of the sword shop in Logatown. He had awoken one day to find a considerable amount of wealth in gold and jewels in his shop. His wife had been singing and dancing with joy at their good fortune, but he was more baffled. Sure, it was nice and he wouldn't turn it away, but where did it come from? To that end, he had practically turned his shop upside down looking for some clue as to why the gold and jewels were there. And he had found it. 2 of his swords were missing, Yubashiri and the Sandai Kidetsu. He had mixed feelings about the latter. The cursed sword was trouble and he was glad to be rid of it, but he was also concerned for whoever took it. He may be greedy, but he was no murderer, and selling that sword to someone would be tantamount to it. Had they simply stolen it, he would have considered their death well earned, but since they had paid, the matter became confusing. Yubashiri on the other hand, was a family heirloom. Although the money left behind was enough to pay for it, the shopkeeper was still upset. He had not been intending to sell that sword, not to just anyone. Only a true swordsman would be worthy of it. His wife didn't understand, she never had. A similar scene repeated itself in many places in Logatown. Eventually, word of the strange phenomenon reached Captain Smoker. Many Marine officers would have taken the opportunity to confiscate the suspicious treasure, but he was better than that. Smoker just waited for something more to happen that would let him figure it out. XXXXX. For the rest of their time in the East Blue, Robin stayed out of sight. Luffy and Sanji considered this a great imposition, but Robin didn't mind. She had books to distract herself with. They managed to get by without causing too much of a ruckus or overtly raising the hackles of the Marines. Mihawk definitely noticed something, as usual, but he kept it to himself. Then they arrived at Logatown, which was this time not half-wrecked because of the stupidity of the Trump pirates. Having gone through this song and dance before, the Straw Hats scattered so they could quickly buy up their respective supplies. There was no sign of Buggy or Alvida anywhere, despite encountering them earlier. Smoker was another matter. XXXXX. Smoker chewed on his cigars as he stared down into the black eyes of Monkey D. Luffy, the 30 million East Blue rookie. He looked pretty harmless, but Smoker knew better than to judge by appearance. Straw Hat, he growled. Smokey, the pirate said back with a strange familiarity. Smoker's eyebrow twitched in irritation. You're under arrest. This pirate crew had been reported to be trading gold and jewels for cash, gold and jewels which bore a striking resemblance to the ones that had appeared randomly in shops all across town a while ago. He wanted answers to that, but he could get them after the pirates were behind bars. No, Luffy said and tipped his hat. Excuse me. Smoker blinked incredulously as the pirate started walking off, as if it was that easy. You can't just refuse to be arrested. He punctuated his statement by launching himself into an attack with his devil fruit. The boy would be subdued in no time. Except that wasn't the way it went. Despite having his back turned to him, Straw Hat easily dodged the attack. Missed. The pirate teased with a big grin, then proceeded to blow a raspberry. Can't catch me, Smokey. Smoker saw red. XXXXX. Elsewhere, Zoro was having an encounter of his own. The first time he had run into Tashigi, he had been so shocked by her resemblance to Kuina that he had completely fumbled the entire interaction. Now that he was expecting it and had some time to think back on how he had handled things, Zoro was doing it differently. 3 swords. The bespectacled Marine noted with surprise. That reminds me of a notorious East Blue bounty hunter, Roronoa Zoro. I'm Zoro, he said blandly, waiting to see what the reaction would be. Tashigi gasped in surprise, then seemed to work herself up into some kind of indignation. Don't you feel bad for misusing your swords? Wait, are those named blades? I would recognize the white hilt of the Wado Ikimonji anywhere. Misusing? Zoro scoffed, ignoring the rest of her muttering. And what else would I use them for if not to match blades with other swordsmen? You should use them for justice. She retorted. Swords don't care about justice. He fired back snidely. This girl might look like Kuina and even have some of the same hang-ups about her gender, but she was a bigger idiot than his old friend had ever been. If anyone here is misusing their sword, it's you. Tashigi sucked in a breath, extremely offended. How dare you say that? My sword is used to protect the innocent from pirates. You just use it to get money. Pirate, marine, bounty hunter, none of that matters. Zoro argued back. The only thing that matters to a swordsman is his skill, his honor, and the chance to challenge himself against others. You're letting yourself get distracted by silly notions about justice, instead of improving your swordsmanship. Justice is not a silly distraction. Tashigi yelled in outrage. If we don't defend the innocent, then who will? They should grow strong enough to defend themselves. Zoro shot her down mercilessly. To him it was obvious that nobody could ever, rely on others to protect them. That kind of protection always failed eventually and then you'd be at the mercy of your enemies. You're too callous. Tashigi was red in the face with anger. Your swords will be confiscated. Somehow, Zoro was not surprised that things ended the same way. This marine girl was pretty dumb. XXXXX. Nami was also dealing with a personal nemesis, shopkeepers that didn't understand that they had already been paid. However, unlike her more direct crewmates, she knew better than to engage with them. Instead, she simply stole back the jewels and gold that they'd used to pay during the previous loop. In this one, the town was not wrecked, so they were able to exchange their treasure for proper money. You know that you can't keep the treasure on the ship forever, right? Usopp, who had been roped into helping her with her schemes, asked. Yes I can. Nami snapped back, greedily jingling the bag of jewels. We're gonna need the cargo hold for other stuff. He continued to argue. We'll get a bigger cargo hold. We can't just get a bigger cargo hold. Luffy said we'd get a bigger ship in Water 7. Nami refused to let it go. Usopp's face went sour at the reminder. To him, the Going Merry was a precious memento from Kaya. He was absolutely not happy about getting another ship, even if Luffy said that the Merry just couldn't handle the Grand Line. To be fair to Luffy, he wanted to save the Merry from being broken just as much as Usopp did, but he was still adamant about getting the Thousand Sunny. Nami ignored his silence and pulled him in another direction. Come on, that clothing shop is next. I can sense my treasure there. You can sense treasure now. XXXXX. Dragon observed his son and his crew with a curious frown, although nobody would be able to tell the difference from his usual expression. Luffy was too strong, too skilled, too experienced, too awakened for a rookie a mere couple of weeks into his first voyage. His haki screamed at him that he was looking at a veteran of, at minimum, the paradise portion of the Grand Line. Captain Smoker was not nearly enough of a challenge to force him to reveal any more of himself. His crew was not nearly so unusual, except for perhaps the one hiding aboard their ship. A mature adult among precocious youngsters. The Straw Hats left Logatown as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind a humiliated marine garrison, some very confused shopkeepers, and a curious revolutionary. XXXXX. So it was that the Straw Hats made it down Reverse Mountain without issue and encountered Laboon. But there was no sign of Vivi. It was with great worry that they sailed on to Whiskey Peak, bracing themselves for the worst. The usual mass of conspirators disguised as bounty hunters disguised as townspeople were there, but no Agaram or Vivi. Questions asked after pummeling them revealed that they had left in a hurry and without explanation. "See what you did," Nami demanded. "I said I was sorry." Luffy pouted. "Now we have to hope that Vivi hasn't gotten herself in trouble." The navigator was not assuaged. Left with nothing else to do, they continued their journey, effectively speedrunning Little Garden and Drum Island both due to their advanced knowledge and lack of interference by Baroque works. But before they could reach Alabasta, they found themselves back on Syrup Island. XXXXX. "Now, what have we learned?" Robin asked pointedly. A badly beaten Luffy and Sanji were kneeling in front of her in Dageza, speaking in unison. "Don't interrupt when you are having important conversations. And you better remember it." Nami's voice was like a whip. She was the cause of the beating. Not only because of the unnecessary, and therefore frustrating, reset, but also because she realized that the money she had gained by trading a portion of their jewels and gold in Logatown was gone, along with the jewels and gold. Apparently, only things that had been with them in Apes concert were coming along for the ride through time. This was a source of immense stress for the navigator and she had been happy to have someone to take it out on. XXXXX. "Omake, always a bigger fish. Release the Kraken," Davy Jones shouted furiously. This did not have the effect he'd been hoping for. "What's a Kraken?" Luffy asked. "It's a big sea beastie, lots of tentacles." Jack Sparrow explained. "Oh, so it's like a sea king." Luffy smacked a fist into his palm in realization. "I wonder if it tastes good." He hadn't been very impressed by this crew of fishmen. Even if they seemed to be immortal, that didn't matter much when they were so weak. He was hoping the Kraken would be more interesting. And so they waited patiently for it to arrive, despite the crew pleading for them to run away. Luffy wanted to see the Kraken and was not going to budge. Davy Jones was more than a bit incensed by this fearlessness. Already, all his attempts to reclaim Jack Sparrow had been foiled with insulting ease by the stretchy boy in the straw hat, now they didn't even have the decency to fear his Kraken. Eventually tentacles started climbing up the hull of the Black Pearl. Luffy smacked them off with ease and looked towards Jack with disappointment. "I thought you said this Kraka was big." Jack could only turn his eyes skyward in exasperation. "And what, pray tell, would constitute as being big for you, Captain?" Yes, he was still a bit salty over being demoted. As if the heavens themselves had deigned to answer him, the Kraken was suddenly yanked back under the water. Seconds later, the seas were dyed red with its blood and a few severed tentacles floated up to the surface. Nobody dared move or speak, too shocked and afraid. Then the back ridge of a truly massive sea serpent briefly broke the surface, looking more like a small mountain range than anything else. The waves it created pushed the Black Pearl and Flying Dutchman apart. "That was pretty big," Luffy said happily, oblivious to the mood. "But what's a Sea King doing here? I feel like I will regret asking, but what is a Sea King?" Jack asked in resignation. "It's, a big mystery fish. They taste good." Nobody could get much more than that out of Luffy, but from then on the oceans of Earth were haunted by monstrous sea creatures known as Sea Kings. They generally preferred to stay in deep, calm waters, but would occasionally surface if they were sufficiently agitated. This had implications. Battles at sea became a dangerous endeavor, as there was always the risk of getting the attention of a Sea King. Empires that relied on the sea to project their power began to have trouble as they lost ships to Sea King attacks. The world became more isolated and cut off, with large amounts of ocean traffic being deemed too risky. The outcome of many a future war was very different. Piracy, on the other hand, flourished. With singular ships drawing less attention than fleets, it became easier for pirates to do their thing. That didn't mean that it wasn't dangerous, however, and the Black Pearl became legendary for its feats of fighting off or surviving Sea Kings. Jack enjoyed this bit of inherited reputation after Luffy found a way to get back home, but he steered well clear of Sea Kings once he reclaimed his title of captain. Chapter 21. This time around, nobody interrupted Robin when she was talking to Vivi on the snail. Everything was going smoothly and according to plan, until they reached Logatown. "All right crew, it's time for us to rob a bank," Nami declared. Was the common reaction, "but we still have so much treasure. Why would we need to rob the bank?" Luffy, of all people, asked sensibly. "Because they cheated me," Nami replied menacingly, a malicious air around her. "Oi, if anyone cheated anyone it was the other way around." Usopp deadpanned. He had been there to see her negotiating over the value of the treasure. No, Nami wasn't having it. The money I got for the treasure is gone, and the treasure is also gone, which means the bank stole from me. What did you expect to happen? We already knew that random stuff we pick up doesn't come back with us. Never mind that, the navigator roared, frustrated. All this time travel was turning the treasure they plundered into dead weight and it was stressing her out. You foo, it's been a while since I last robbed a bank. Robin chuckled. It does sound kind of fun. Luffy agreed, warming up to the idea. XXXXX. I will be the pirate king. The shout echoed throughout the square, making Smoker bite down hard on his cigars. There was such absolute certainty in that brazen statement, made from the execution platform where Roger's life had ended. It was a massive insult to the world government and to the Marines. Smoker rushed forward to arrest this rookie that thought he could get away with that, expecting to see surprise and maybe panic in the eyes of the pirate as he saw a Marine propelled by smoke coming at him. What he got was an easy grin and a strange familiarity. Smokey. Straw Hat. He shouted back, temper worsened by the stupid nickname. The fight, as expected, was very one-sided, but in the wrong direction. Smoker found that trying to pin Straw Hat down was worse than trying to grip a greased eel. The boy knew how to move, and he was both fast and strong. For the first time since eating the smoke fruit, he found himself outmatched. Nobody he had faced before had ever been able to counter the Logia powers, even if they weren't offensive in nature. Monkey D. Luffy more than managed. He seemed to know every trick and apparently delighted in mockingly slipping out of Smoker's reach at the last second. The Seastone-lined jeet didn't help either, likewise avoided and countered with ease. Smoker had never been so furious in his life. Captain Smoker. One of his subordinates interrupted, sounding panicked. Smoker turned away from the pirate he was fighting to face the underling. Usually, that would be as good as giving your enemy a free hit, but his Logia powers had been good for at least that much. To his private aggravation, Straw Hat didn't even try. What? He barked. Captain, pirates have robbed the bank. Realization crystallized in Smoker's mind. Straw Hat hadn't been taking him seriously, hadn't even been fighting him. He'd just caused a huge ruckus. His head snapped towards the pirate with a furious glare, which was the same look he'd been giving him since the start, but this time it had a slightly different source. Straw Hat, he roared. Luffy pulled down his eyelid and stuck out his tongue. Hee, I'm a distraction. XXXXX. The Unluckies were curious members of Baroque Works, so named for their uncanny ability to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The wrong place and time for other people, that was. Quite a few agents had met their ends after the Otter and Vulture combo had overheard something treasonous or otherwise not permitted within the organization. Robin was aware of this, and also knew that they were the greatest threat to their plan to deal with Crocodile. Thus, she fully expected the Unluckies to be on Whiskey Peak when the Going Merry sailed in. She was right, and smiled to herself in amusement as she turned their moniker against them. It truly was unlucky for them to be there when secrecy was required. After all, there was only one way to truly assure that a person would never betray a secret. The Unluckies died with their necks snapped behind a rock on Whiskey Peak, now food for other vultures. The rest of the crew and the disguised bounty hunters' agents never realized anything. Robin sauntered through the small town in her Miss All-Sunday outfit, diffusing any shenanigans and quickly having them ensconced in a private room with the hidden princess and a garum. Robin still found it rather surreal how casually Luffy allowed the crew to usurp his authority. Oh, he certainly insisted on being known as the captain, but he rarely gave any orders and simply trusted people to do what they were good at. She could definitely understand how she might have found herself joining this crew in truth, especially if they had gone so far as to assault Enies lobby to get her back. This version of her didn't remember that, so there was still some doubt in her heart and she couldn't bring herself to fully trust them, but she could imagine the possibility. What can we do for you, Miss All-Sunday? Agarum, or Mr. 8, asked formally. He was pretty good at hiding his nervousness. I recognize Straw Hat Luffy from his recent bounty. Is he a new recruit for Baroque Works? Nothing of the sort, Robin said easily and turned to smile at Vivi. He is here to help you save your kingdom, Princess San. Both Agarum and Vivi froze in shock. The statement was so far out of expectation that they had no idea how to react. What? Vivi stuttered. Nami, you may release the captain. Robin nodded to the navigator. The orange-haired girl nodded back and let go of the death grip she had on the captain. He could have broken out easily, but would have had to hurt Nami to do so, so he just mumbled into her hand. Sadly, such measures were probably necessary to keep the rubber man from forgetting that he was supposed to keep his mouth shut. Sanji, at least, could be threatened into not making grand declarations of love and understood the importance of subtlety. Vivi. Luffy cheered. Vivi took a deep breath and visibly discarded the persona of Miss Wednesday, assuming instead a royal poise. Please explain what is going on. And so Luffy did. Dozens of resets had taught him through brute force repetition how to get through to Vivi. Plus, his subtly increasing haki was helping to make him more charismatic. With the rest of his crew there to help polish off the rough edges and provide some proof of the situation, Vivi was eventually convinced. I believe I understand. The princess aid once it was done and bowed her head. Thank you for helping me, I will place my kingdom's future in your hands. Yeah, Luffy roared. Let's go kick the sand croc's ass. XXXXX. This time, they entered Alabasta with all the advantages. Not only was Crocodile unaware of them, but Robin was still technically the second in command of Baroque Works. Making an excuse about her abrupt disappearance and placating the warlord was a fairly simple matter. She was still under suspicion because he was just like that, but she still had enough wiggle room to organize the downfall of his organization and bait him into a fight with Luffy where he couldn't use his devil fruit to its maximum potential. The situation was concluded in a matter of days and the Straw Hats once again found themselves being guests of honor in the royal palace. It was there that Nami made one of the most difficult decisions of her life. C-CC could you PPP please keep my TT treasure S safe in your versus vault. She managed to force out even as every cell in her body wailed in protest at this action. Of course, King Cobra blinked in baffled surprise. But why? I was going to pay you for the aid you've given my people. It seems strange for you to be giving us treasure. Seeing that Nami was on the verge of having a stroke, Robin took it upon herself to explain the situation with the time-traveling swag and the troubles it was causing them. I see. King Cobra stroked his beard and thought. Yes, that would definitely be problematic. We will be happy to guard your treasure here, of course. While I have no doubt that a pile of gold and jewels appearing in our treasury without explanation will cause some alarm, if you explain it to us in a future loop, we will gladly allow you to take as much of it or the money equivalent as you wish. And since the money wouldn't travel back in time with them, they could continually cash it in every loop. Nami was still trembling from the effort of parting with treasure even temporarily, but she could see the value of this arrangement. Thanks, Vivi's dad. You're a cool guy, Luffy said. Cobra laughed even as his guards bristled at the lack of respect. Think nothing of it, this is the least I can do for the heroes of Alabasta. I'm not sharing my meat. This isn't a hero loop. XXXXX. The Straw Hats left Alabasta with time to spare, accepting Vivi as part of the crew even though she stayed behind. Their first destination was supposed to be Ruluka Island and perhaps some answers to this strange new temporal situation, but the log pose would not lock onto it. Luffy mentioned that it wasn't always there, but they decided to check the place out anyway. Nami, after raging at him for a bit for asking her to pull off the impossible, promptly pulled off the impossible and managed to at least eyeball the location from sheer memory and gut instinct about the sea currents. There, they find no sign of the island, but they do find a familiar old man sitting on a raft. Henzo. Luffy yelled at him in greeting. Straw Hats. He called back more sedately. I was hoping you would come back here even if Ruluka Island is gone. Their conversation was briefly paused as they brought the scientist aboard. Henzo-san, you seem to have some idea of what's going on. Robin restarted the conversation. Yes, he admitted. I found myself dumped into the water here, where Ruluka Island was supposed to be. Thankfully, my friends were nearby to save me. They also retained their memories. In fact, they have two different sets of memories. One where Ruluka Island exists and events play out as normal, and another set where it does not exist, and they find themselves scattered on nearby islands, and became friends through some providence. Their memories came to them only at the moment when I assume yours did, and they decided to sail here, just in time to save me. That's strange, nothing of the sort happened to us. Sanji puffed on his cigarette. Well, aside from the teleportation thing. That's not true. Luffy butted in, pointing a finger at Nami. Some loops, she already knew about Wunan's treasure, or weird stuff would happen, like islands moving around. So, this isn't a new occurrence for you. Henzo rubbed at his chin. I would need more data before I can offer more than conjecture, but if I had to guess then whatever method of time travel you are using can sometimes miss, and drop you in an alternate timeline. And that is without factoring in the interference from the rainbow mist. Interference? Nami prompted. Oh yes, you didn't think that bringing two different forms of temporal meddling together would be without consequences, did you? Consequences? Chopper and Usopp asked fearfully. Henzi raised an eyebrow. In the previous loop, Ruluka Island existed. My instruments all began detecting a buildup of exotic energies. I had calculated that it would reach some kind of critical mass at approximately the time when the Gateway to Apes concert opened. My theory was that the appearance of the rainbow mist would lead to a catastrophic release of energy. Luffy tilted his head in confusion. Explosions, Luffy. Explosions, Nami said in a long-suffering tone. Oh, why not just say explosions, then? Henzo continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. The whole island would likely have been destroyed, so I told Weten that Apes concert would come to him and advised him to evacuate Ruluka to prevent anyone from making off with his treasure. Clever, Robin complimented. I am a genius, the old man stated, but this does leave me at loose ends. My friends appear to be safe and content with their lives, and the mystery of the rainbow mist is as solved as it is ever likely to get. I have spent my life studying temporal phenomena, so I would request that you take me along with you on your voyage. Several people exclaimed in surprise. Aren't you upset about your home island being destroyed? Nami asked, feeling a bit bad since it seemed that it was their presence that caused that. Not really. Henzo shrugged. Like I said, my friends are well settled and not trapped inside Ape's concert. I was never close to the rest of Ruluka Island, and Weten and his crew will get what they deserve. Your crew presents the best chance of unraveling the secrets of time. Sure, welcome aboard, Luffy decided. One moment, Robin interrupted. We believe that the time travel is now linked to the Going Merry and that she only carries back members of the crew. Am I right to assume that you have no interest in becoming a pirate? Yes, Henzo nodded. But I came back with you that first time, so I believe that I only need to stay on the ship. Worst comes to worst, you can come collect me here again if the reset happens when I am not aboard. If you grant my request, then I will of course be happy to share my research with you. I already agreed, Luffy said, annoyed. Sorry, Captain, but I had to make sure that Henzo understood the situation. Robin chuckled. XXXXX. Sailing towards Jaya, they expected the usual spiel of avoiding Blackbeard and going to see Cricket. However, things started going off expectation right away. Old man Cricket, what happened to you? Luffy burst out. Did you lose a fight with a fish? Cricket, covered in bruises almost head to toe, calmly took a drag from his cigarette. Some fat-ass pirate and his crew wanted to go up to Sky Island and wouldn't take no for an answer. He beat up one of the local pests, some fool called Bellamy, took his ship, and forced me to alter it so it could ride the knock upstream. Blackbeard, Luffy hissed. That's what he called himself. Cricket nodded. I take it that this has never happened before. Robin asked. No, Luffy replied grumpily. I have no idea what that bastard wants with Sky Island. You said that his goal was to join the 7 warlords so that he can infiltrate Impel Down. The archaeologist continued. And who boy had it been a chore to coax that information out of him. Not because he was unwilling to talk, but because he didn't pay attention to details. So we can reasonably assume that this is still his goal. Delivering a Sky Island to the world government would certainly be enough for that now that Crocodile has been deposed. We have to stop him. Sanji yelled, slamming his fist against the wall of the house. There are angel girls up there. Zoro just snorted in contempt. Can he even beat Enel? Nami asked dubiously. I know you said he beat Ace, but that lightning Logia is nothing to sneeze at. They were all well aware that Luffy's victory over Enel rested entirely on the fact that his devil fruit happened to be a hard counter to the Guro Guro no Mi. From the psychological profile they had built of Blackbeard by talking to Luffy and Ace, it was entirely possible that the treacherous pirate would get fried by the god impersonator. Blackbeard will win, Luffy said with certainty. He had fought both men and knew which one was stronger. Excuse, but what the fuck are you taking about? Cricket asked calmly. XXXXX. Convincing Cricket to help them get up to Skypia was easy, especially after he heard that the resolution to his ancestor's story was up there. With Luffy's prior experience and the extra time they had from the quick conclusion of the situation in Alabasta, they were able to do all the work in good time. I am too old for this. Henzo gasped as they made it to the White Sea, soaked in a full-body sweat. He could barely breathe in the thin air and he was shaking uncontrollably. It really did seem like we were about to die for a moment there. Robin agreed, perfectly calm. Let's go. Up to the White Sea. Luffy declared, pointing in a random direction. Right. To the gold. Nami agreed, checked the log pose, and turned about 70 degrees off from where Luffy was pointing. No wiper this time. Luffy asked nobody in particular as the berserker failed to appear. Then he shrugged it off as irrelevant, going to sit on his special seat. The first sign that something was very wrong met them at Heaven's Gate. Instead of the elderly gatekeeper Amazon and her rip-off admission prices, all they found was a splotch of dried blood and some structural damage. That set a grim tone for the rest of the voyage to Angel Beach. You have to cut out the bottom of these and then you can drink the yummy juice inside. Luffy explained to Usopp and Chopper as they investigate the strange rock-hard pumpkin things. If there was one thing that he never forgot, it was delicious food. Kanis taught us how to do this after we almost broke our teeth on them. Where is the beautiful angel lady? Sanji asked, looking around. Her house is somewhere around here. Luffy replied, looking around as well. Ah, it's over there. Then let's go. They found the house that Kanis lived in with her father, Pagaya, easily enough. It looked the same as ever, but Luffy couldn't help but feel like it was less welcoming than he remembered. Maybe that was just because Kanis hadn't led them to it. He stayed back and let Nami do the talking, as she demanded. After the navigator politely knocked on the door, there was nothing but silence for a minute, then it cautiously creaked open. Yes, Pagaya asked carefully, taking in their blue sea garb with tense eyes. Hi, we're new here and we were hoping you could tell us what's going on. Nami asked with her best friendly smile. We heard that an evil pirate crew from down below had made it up here and we saw signs of a fight at Heaven's Gate. Pagaya was silent for a long while, before slowly nodding. Please come in. The Straw Hats trooped in, some of them rubbernecking more obviously than others at the strange to them house. Father, do we have guests? Kanis asked, her smile more than a bit brittle and uneasy. Yes, could you please prepare some refreshments? XXXXX. They weren't the first Blue Sea dwellers to come to Skypia. Pagaya began speaking softly, nor the first to be hostile. Enel had decreed years ago that all were to be sent to Upper Yard so that they may be tested. None of them ever survived, but this Blackbeard fellow was different. He and his crew killed the white berets that tried to send them to Upper Yard, and then went there anyway. We heard the sounds of Enel's thunder and thought that they had been killed like all the rest, but then they returned and said that we were going to be traded to the world government. Pagaya paused. What is the world government? Robin fielded that one. It is a powerful, corrupt, and tyrannical organization that controls most of the Blue Sea. Their leaders will likely take immense offense at your leader being called God, as they consider themselves to be the descendants of the world's creators. If Skypia falls under world government control, they will most likely enslave all of you just to prove a point. Oi, Robin, isn't that a bit too blunt? Usopp protested as he saw the horrified faces of their hosts. We're not going to let that happen, Luffy declared, smashing a fist down on the table. We're going to fight Blackbeard and his crew. He knew that they would probably lose, but it had been a while since he'd fought the fat bastard. And it wasn't like they could just run away. Canis and Pagaya were their friends, even if they didn't remember, so were Gonfall and even Wiper and Little Isa. Oh, so this is a hero loop? Zoro asked, just a hint of teasing in his tone. I'm still not sharing my meat. XXXXX. As the Straw Hats made their way to Upper Yard, they passed the partially destroyed settlement of Angel Island, a clear sign of the Blackbeard pirates' handiwork. The survivors of the raid huddled in their homes and didn't even dare peek out at them. Once they reached Upper Yard, they once again saw signs of battle. Fallen Shandian warriors and Enel's enforcers. Further in, they started coming across the bodies of Wiper's strongest comrades alongside Enel's priests. Old Night Guy, Luffy exclaimed when they found Gonfall next to the wrecked body of the giant snake Nola. The Knight of the Sky seemed to have been fighting side by side with the Master of the Sky. Chopper rushed to see if there was anything he could do, but he could only shake his head. The old knight's armor was perforated by numerous large bullet wounds, as was the flesh beneath. Monkey D. Luffy, the new rookie out of the East Blue. A calm voice came from the side. How peculiar to find you here. The Straw Hats jumped into battle stances, ready to defend themselves. The man facing them was tall and thin, with curly hair sticking somewhat sideways away from his head and a placid expression on his face. Over one eye was a marksman's monocle and he carried a long rifle in his arms. Ah, Blackbeard's sniper, Luffy yelled. When did you get here? It was a good question, because there had been no trace of him anywhere just a second ago. Just now, Van Augur answered placidly. I must ask you to come with me to see my captain. He will want to speak with you. I'll kick his ass after I kick yours. The rubber man roared and launched into the attack. Van Augur didn't so much as twitch as the first approached him. He took the punch straight to the face and was sent flying back. Everyone, including Luffy, was baffled. That was too easy. Of course, how foolish of me. Van Augur stated, wiping some blood off his face. It only makes sense that a rubber paramesha would counter a lightning Logia. A good lesson about overconfidence. The meaning of the words took a second to sink in. But Enel ate the devil fruit. Luffy was confused. Indeed, a devilish smile broke Van Augur's placid expression, and he briefly transformed into lightning to travel some distance away. If you will not come before my captain willingly, then I will drag you there by force. Sparks of electrical energy crackled along the rifle as he aimed it at the Straw Hats. XXXXX. Aside from his ability to enhance Kanbushoku Haki and shape metal with given powers, Enel had been fairly unimaginative with his devil fruit. Most of his attacks were just variant blasts of lightning. Van Augur was an entirely different beast. He was a sniper first and foremost, and used the powers of the lightning Logia to enhance that. Primarily, he used it for mobility or to boost the speed and power of his shots. Luffy found himself defeated, unable to even close into melee, and the rest of the crew was still utterly powerless against a Logia, never mind such a strong one. Ziahaha, fate truly does work in mysterious ways, doesn't it, Straw Hat? Blackbeard laughed as they were dumped in front of him. I was just wondering if you were worth adding to my crew when a ship falls out of the sky and gets me thinking that there might be something valuable up here, now here you are as well. Ziahaha. The rotund pirate was looking a little bit singed, so he clearly hadn't beaten Enel easily, but it didn't seem to be slowing him down. Luffy had encountered him often enough to know that Blackbeard was extremely tough, so he wasn't surprised. How did you transfer Enel's devil fruit to your subordinate? A severely injured Robin managed to ask, knowing that this could be crucial information for the next loop. It's just something I can do. Blackbeard bragged without actually revealing anything. I have to admit, that I didn't expect to find such a powerful devil fruit up here, but it's a perfect fit for Van Augur. That delusional fool Enel could have killed all of us if he wasn't so arrogant, Ziahahaha. Nobody ever expects the Yami no Mi to cancel out their protection. Blackbeard laughed again, then tapered off as he took a closer look at who he was talking to. Say, aren't you Nico Robin, the only person alive who can read the poneglyphs? Fate really must be on my side, Ziahahaha. With you in my crew, the road to One Piece is open. We will never be nakama with you. Luffy spat with genuine hatred. What did I ever do to you? Blackbeard blinked in confusion. You betrayed Ace and his crew. Luffy got up on his feet, prepared to fight to the death. He already knew that he wouldn't win, but he'd go down swinging. You know Ace. Blackbeard was even more confused, but then realization lit up his face. Wait, you're that little brother he always bragged about. Huh, that always annoyed me, so I tried to tune it out. Maybe I should have paid attention after all, ziahahaha. Luffy attacked with a yell, aiming to plant his fist in Blackbeard's extremely punchable face. Unfortunately for him, he was still pretty badly injured from the holes that Van Augur put into his legs. Blackbeard slapped him down into the ground with ease, his yummy no mi nullifying the defensive properties of Luffy's devil fruit. Straw Hat, I'll give you one more chance. Join my crew, and then we can convince Ace to do the same. I know I might not seem like much now, but I've got big plans. Go to hell. Luffy shot back without hesitation and attack again. Blackbeard sighed in disappointment. You first. XXXXX. The Straw Hats once again awoke on the Mary's deck on Syrup Island. Sanji didn't even bother getting up. He just lit up a cigarette and exhaled a cloud of smoke. That lightning Logia is such bullshit. Sanji-san, Luffy, Nami, a familiar voice exclaimed in increasing confusion. Princess Nefertari Vivi stood on the deck of the Mary, dressed in her Miss Wednesday getup, looking around in shock. How did I get here? XXXXX. Omake. The Flying Dutchman was not a festive ship, which made it all the weirder for a party to be happening on it. That it was happening at all was due entirely to a misunderstanding. Davy Jones had tried to attack the Black Pearl and gotten pummeled quite badly by the inhumanly powerful Straw Hat pirates. The only reason his crew wasn't completely out of commission was because they were magical. Frustrated, he had called to release the Kraken. Unfortunately for him, Luffy had been hungry. Zoro had sliced it up, and Sanji had started cooking it. Luffy had taken the summoning of the Kraken as a peace offering, because enemies don't give you food, and declared that they would be having a party to celebrate their new friendship. All further attempts at murdering the Straw Hats were taken as playful roughhousing. Do you poop? That was the question that made Davy Jones choke so hard on his rage and humiliation that he stomped off with a roar, retreating into the bowels of his ship. I guess not. Luffy nodded sympathetically. I'd be mad too if I couldn't poop. XXXXX. Meanwhile, in a slightly out-of-the-way part of the ship, Jack Sparrow had cornered Nami, having identified the orange-haired woman as the one who was actually in charge most of the time. I'm just saying, love, we could work well together, you and I. He cajoled. You love your gold, and I love the sea. If I were to become captain of the Flying Dutchman, just imagine all the gold I could raise from the bottom of the sea for you. All you'd have to do is convince your captain to let me take a little stab at Davy Jones' heart. Tell me more. Nami invited with half-lidded eyes. One could be forgiven for mistaking her sultry tone as lustful. It was, in fact, greedy. XXXXX. Still elsewhere, people had been won over by the delicious smell of perfectly seared and seasoned Kraken meat and started eating. It was the most delicious thing they'd ever eaten. How could any woman turn you down when you can cook like this? One of the Flying Dutchman's crew almost cried as he used his shark teeth to bite into a big hunk of sea monster meat. They have to be stupid. Sanji took a drag of his cigarette and politely waited for the fishified and barnacled man to finish chewing. Then he kicked him so hard that he flew into the hull of the ship and sank into it. Don't insult a lady in front of me, shithead. XXXXX. Sitting with their backs against the ship's railing, the group that had come to be known as the Idiot Quartet, although they themselves were unaware of this, had taken their meals and started another discussion. Say, which type of devil fruit do you think is the best? Mulroy suddenly asked. Gotta be one of 'em Logias, right? Rigetti said immediately, pronouncing, Logia, is Logia. Just imagine being able to turn into fire or lightning. You'd be invincible. I will grant you that they start out the strongest, but I personally think there's a lot to be said for the zone type. Murtaugh posited. Not only does it make you tough and you heal fast, but you also get to turn into an animal. My mother used to have a cat, and it was the most spoiled creature I've ever seen. If you ate a zone and ever got fed up with having human problems, you could just turn into an animal and relax for a while. That wouldn't work with all animals. Pintle sneered. What if you turned into something like a cow or a pig? Wouldn't be very relaxing, now would it? I think the kind Captain Luffy has is the best. Paramesha. Mulroy asked, figuring that Pintle forgot what they were called. Yeah, that. The belligerent homunculus, as Jack Sparrow had once described him, nodded. Might not be turning into fire or lightning, but they give all sorts of weird powers. Captain can only stretch, but I went asking around what other kinds there are. Apparently, there's one that lets you turn things to gold. What? Rigetti gaped at him. Just touch something and it turns to gold. Imagine it. Pintle's eyes glinted greedily. Who needs anything else when you've got infinite gold? They all imagined it for a while, seeing themselves enjoying the benefits of unlimited wealth. I can't help but wonder why the sea hates people who eat a devil fruit, though. Mulroy eventually said, "No matter how I look at it, it just doesn't make sense. What if you get an aquatic zone, for instance?" And Captain Luffy mentioned an ice logia, which is just frozen water. Aquatic. What's that? Rigetti asked, puzzled. An animal that lives in water is aquatic. Ooh, wait, what would happen if you ate a fish zone? That'd be pretty dumb if you couldn't swim, wouldn't it? Pintle said to himself. Maybe there's exceptions. The four looked at each other and shrugged. XXXXX. Meanwhile, in a different reality, King Cobra could only gape at the pile of gold and gems in shock and confusion. How did all of this get in here? We don't know, Your Majesty. One of the guards admitted. It seemed to just appear out of thin air, which he knew was a ridiculous thing to say, but it was unfortunately the truth. Leave it be for now, and keep it separated from the rest. The king decided. An easy enough thing to do, since the mysterious treasure pile was already pointedly separated from the rest of Alabasta's gold. Whoever put this treasure here will undoubtedly reveal themselves in time. Speak of it to no one. Yes, Your Majesty. The guards saluted and shut the doors. Shut them a bit too hard, as the vibrations of the slamming doors were just enough to set off a small gemstone avalanche. Normally, this would not be a problem, but there was a largish canopic jar sitting atop those very gems, and it fell to the floor. With the tinkling smash of fragile ceramic, the ancient jar was destroyed, an event that would no doubt have a certain archaeologist coldly furious. However, amid the ceramic shards was a peculiar, unnatural fruit.